When his first love walks back into his empire as the one person who can destroy him, neither of them will survive this unchanged. The champagne glass didn't just fall, it shattered, crystal exploding across imported marble like a gunshot, silencing 400 people in an instant. Every head turned, every conversation died. And Kang Jae-hyun, the most feared man in South Korea, stood frozen at the entrance of his own engagement party, staring across the ballroom at the one face he had spent 9 years trying to forget. She was supposed to be gone. She was supposed to be nobody. Instead, Nia Brooks stood in the center of his world wearing a black dress and 9 years of survival on her shoulders. And the expression on her face told him she hadn't come here to dance. If you've ever loved someone your family tried to erase, this story is for you. Hit like, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled and follow all the way to the end. You will not see this ending coming. The engagement party had been Jae-hyun's mother's idea. Everything about it was her idea. The venue, the guest list, the timing, even the woman standing at the other end of the room, wearing a champagne-colored gown and a smile that had been professionally calibrated for exactly this kind of occasion. Seo Yeon-ji was 28, elegant, the eldest daughter of the Seo family, whose shipping networks ran through every major port on the Korean peninsula. She was appropriate. She was strategic. She was in every measurable way exactly what a Kang heir was supposed to want. Jae-hyun had agreed to the engagement 6 weeks ago with the same energy he brought to most decisions these days, a flat, exhausted compliance dressed up as authority. He had looked at his mother across the dining room table, looked at the documents laying out the Seo family's assets and political connections, and said yes the way a man says yes when he has already forgotten what it feels like to want something. That was 6 weeks ago. Tonight, standing in the entrance of the Grand Hyatt Seoul's most exclusive ballroom, his champagne glass in pieces at his feet, and 400 of the most powerful people in the country watching his face, Jae-hyun was remembering what it felt like to want something. The feeling came back fast and ugly, like a bone resetting wrong. He hadn't dropped the glass. His hand had simply stopped working the moment his eyes found her. She was standing near the center of the room, beside the Mirai technology delegation. 12 executives in dark suits who had arrived an hour ago as representatives of the government's new infrastructure project, a $12 billion initiative that the Kang Syndicate's corporate division had been quietly bleeding money to support for the past 2 years. Jae-hyun had been told the delegation would include a guest, CEO, someone whose company had developed the only quantum encryption architecture capable of supporting the project's data security requirements. He had not been told her name, or maybe he had. Maybe someone had said Brooks Quantum Systems, and he had nodded and moved on because the name Brooks meant nothing to him anymore, because he had spent 9 years making sure it meant nothing to him, because he was Kang Jae-hyun, and he ran an empire, and he did not think about girls from the past who had vanished into America with their mothers and never looked back. Except she had looked back. She was looking at him right now. Nia Brooks was 34 years old, and she looked nothing like the 17-year-old girl who used to sit cross-legged on the floor of his family's library with her economics textbook spread around her like a barricade against the world. She was taller somehow, or maybe it was just the way she held herself, spine straight, shoulders back, not with the stiffness of someone performing confidence, but with the quietness of someone who had earned it. Her hair was natural, pulled back from her face, and she wore a black dress that cost more than most people in this room would admit to spending and less than half of them would expect her to be wearing. No excessive jewelry, no performance. Just her, standing in the middle of Jae-hyun's carefully constructed world, with dark eyes that had crossed 400 people in 300 square meters of ballroom to find his face in less than 4 seconds. She had found him that fast, which meant she had known he would be here, which meant she had come anyway. A server materialized at Jae-hyun's elbow. "Sir, allow me to—" "Leave it!" He didn't look at the server. He didn't look at anything except her. The crowd was recovering, conversations restarting. Someone laughed nearby, a little too loudly, breaking the tension the way people at these events always did, by pretending nothing had cracked. Across the room, Jae-hyun's chief of staff, Park Sung-jin, was moving toward him with the careful urgency of a man who had learned over 8 years that his employer's stillness was more dangerous than his anger. Jae-hyun raised one hand slightly without turning his head. Sung Jin stopped. He needed 30 seconds. He needed to understand what his own body was doing, why his chest felt like something had been rearranged inside it, why 9 years of discipline had just collapsed like wet paper the moment a woman in a black dress looked at him from across a room. He needed to stop staring at her. He looked away, straightened his jacket, picked up a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray, and drank half of it in one motion, which was not something Kang Jae-hyun did at public events. But Kang Jae-hyun was currently operating on instinct rather than protocol, and his instincts were screaming at him in a language he thought he had forgotten. Sung Jin appeared at his shoulder, voice low. "The Brooks Quantum CEO. You know her." Not a question. "We've met," Jae-hyun said. Sung Jin waited. When no more information came, he said carefully, "She's the critical resource for the Mirai project. The government contract is non-negotiable. Director Choi made that very clear. Without Brooks Quantum's encryption system, the entire infrastructure deal collapses." He paused. "Including our stake in it. I'm aware of what the deal involves. The Mirai Group is expecting an introduction tonight. CEO Brooks specifically requested, not tonight." Sung Jin hesitated. "Jae-hyun-si, the contract is worth—" "I said not tonight, Sung Jin." He set the champagne glass down on a nearby table without looking at it. His voice had gone very quiet, which everyone in his organization knew was worse than loud. "Manage the Mirai delegation. Tell them I'll arrange a formal meeting next week. Give them whatever they need tonight to feel appropriately valued." Sung Jin nodded once, already adjusting, already solving. He had been doing that for 8 years, absorbing whatever Jae-hyun threw at him and turning it into functional outcomes. It was why he was the only person in the syndicate's operation that Jae-hyun genuinely trusted. "And the glass?" Sung Jin asked. "It slipped." "Of course." A pause. "Your mother has been looking for you for the past 20 minutes. Jae-hyun almost smiled. "Tell her I've been handling business." He moved through the crowd in the direction that was directly away from Nia Brooks, which took considerable effort because something in his body kept trying to correct the direction, kept trying to pull him back toward the center of the room like a compass needle fighting the wrong pole. He stopped at the bar, ordered water, stood with his back to the room, and focused on breathing. He was 35 years old. He ran an organization that employed thousands of people through legitimate channels and an unknown number through channels that did not appear in any public filing. He had sat across from government ministers and crime bosses and corporate raiders and never once lost the thread of control that kept everything functional. He had been engaged for 6 weeks to a woman he did not love and felt nothing more complicated than a low-grade numbness about it. One look at Nia Brooks and his hands didn't work. He stood at the bar for 4 minutes, which was long enough for Seo Yeon-ji to find him. She appeared at his side with the particular grace of a woman who had been trained since childhood to appear effortless at exactly these moments, and she slid her hand through his arm and stood close enough that the room would read it as affection rather than the tactical positioning it actually was. She was not a bad person. Jae-hyun had spent some effort over the past 6 weeks confirming this, that she was simply a woman doing what her family required of her, the same way he was a man doing what his family required of him. It made him neither like her more nor feel better about any of it, "You've been avoiding the Mirai Group," she said quietly, her smile not moving. "I've been managing the room. Your mother wants you to make the rounds with me. The Choi family is here, and the Baek delegation from Busan arrived late. Apparently their flight was delayed. She wants photographs with both families before 10. Tell her I'll be there in a few minutes." Yeonji's fingers tightened slightly on his arm. Not much. Just enough to let him know she had noticed something. She was observant. Jae-hyun had to give her that. She had been watching him since he walked in, and she had cataloged the dropped glass and the 4 minutes at the bar, and now she was standing next to him doing the math. "Who is she?" Yeonji asked. The question landed with less drama than it deserved. Jae-hyun turned to look at his fiancée. The woman he would marry in 8 months. The woman whose family's shipping empire would stabilize 3 of the Kang syndicate's most exposed financial positions. And he considered the question. "No one you need to worry about," he said. Yeonji looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she nodded, the movement small and precise. "That's almost exactly what someone would say about the person I need to worry about most." She released his arm and moved back into the room, smooth and unhurried, and Jae-hyun watched her go and thought, not for the first time, that she deserved better than this arrangement. They both did. He turned back to the room. Nia was gone, sobbed. He found her 20 minutes later on the hotel's 32nd floor terrace, which was not open to event guests and required a key card that she had apparently obtained from somewhere, which told him she had prepared for this possibility, that she might need to be alone or that she might need him to come looking for her. He wasn't sure which was more unsettling. The terrace looked out over the Han River, and the city below was doing what Seoul always did at night, burning with cold light in every direction, enormous and indifferent and relentless. Nia stood at the railing with her back to the door, and she didn't turn around when he stepped outside, which meant she had heard the door open and chose not to turn around, which was a choice, which meant she was making him come to her. He stopped a few feet away. Let the door close behind him. The night air was cold for late spring, sharper than the season warranted, and he could see her shoulders tense slightly against it, but she didn't move. "You could have had your people tell me you were here," he said, "before the event." "I could have," she said. "Why didn't you?" She turned around then. Up close, the 9 years were more visible, not as damage, not as decay, but as weight, as accumulation. Her eyes were the same, that particular dark brown that he had spent an embarrassing portion of his 20s trying not to think about. But there were things behind them now that hadn't been there when she was 17. Things that looked like decisions made in hard rooms and grief processed alone and success achieved at a cost that never quite made it into the press releases. "Because I wanted to see your face," she said, "when you didn't know I was coming." "And?" She tilted her head slightly. "And you dropped your glass. It slipped. You've never dropped anything in your life, Jae-hyun." She said his name the way she used to say it. No title, no honorific, just the name itself, which no one else in his life said that way anymore. It hit him somewhere behind his sternum. "I watched you carry a priceless ink painting through a rainstorm once without getting it wet. Your hands don't slip." He didn't answer that. There was no good answer. She turned back to the railing, looking out at the city. "I almost didn't take the Mirai contract," she said. "When my team told me the Kong corporate division was involved, I almost said no." "What changed your mind?" "The project matters. What it would do for the country's data infrastructure. The actual impact on actual people. I couldn't let the contract go to a less capable firm because I had personal complications." She paused. "I also told myself that 9 years was enough time, that I was a professional, that I could walk into a room where you were and feel nothing." "Could you?" A long silence. The river below them moved in the dark, silent from this height. "I felt something when I saw you," she said. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I need you to understand something, Jae-hyun. I'm not here for whatever you're about to tell yourself I'm here for. I'm here for the contract. I'm here because the government needs my technology and your corporate infrastructure, and we are going to work together professionally for 6 weeks, and then I am going back to New York." "Okay," he said. She looked at him. "Okay? What else do you want me to say?" "I want you to say you understand." "I understand," he said. And then, because he was 35 years old and had spent 9 years learning to say true things clearly, even when they were inconvenient. "And I also understand that you being here is the first time in 9 years that something in this city has felt like it matters." Nia stared at him. Something moved across her face. Not softness, not the melting walls emotional moment that the situation might suggest, but something harder than that and more honest. Anger, maybe, or the complicated thing that lives just next to anger, when someone says something you didn't give them permission to say, and it's true anyway. "Don't do that," she said. "I'm not doing anything. You're doing that thing where you say the true thing and let it sit there and wait for me to react to it. Or I'm just talking to you, the way I used to. We're not 17 anymore." "No," he agreed. "We're not." He moved to the railing, a few feet from her, and looked out at the city. "You built something extraordinary. I followed your company from the early days, before the Series B, before the MIT press coverage, from the first patent filing." She went very still. "Don't be surprised," he said. "You knew I would. I didn't know anything about what you would do. You knew me." "I knew a boy," she said, and her voice had gone quieter, the edges of something dangerous in it. A boy who watched his family destroy mine and couldn't stop it. I don't know what kind of man you became. It landed the way it was meant to. Not cruelly, but precisely. Like a scalpel rather than a hammer. Taehyun absorbed it, which was all he could do because she was not wrong, and he had spent 9 years knowing she was not wrong. No, he said, you don't. They stood in silence for a while after that. The city burned below them. The wind off the river was getting colder. The first meeting is Monday, she said eventually. 9 a.m. Kang Tower, 42nd floor, I assume? Yes. I'll have my lead architect and 2 senior engineers. We'll need access to your infrastructure team's technical documentation by Friday. You'll have it Thursday. She nodded, a professional nod, a nod that was doing a great deal of emotional work. Monday, she said, and pushed off the railing and walked past him toward the door. Nia. She stopped but didn't turn around. Your mother, he said. Is she... He stopped. The question was wrong. The question assumed things. He restructured it. Is she well? A long silence. Long enough that he counted it. Good night, Jae-hyun, she said, and went inside. He didn't sleep that night. This was not unusual. Jae-hyun averaged 4 to 5 hours most nights, a habit cultivated over years of running an organization where problems arrived on a 24-hour schedule and every delayed response cost something. But usually when he didn't sleep, it was because his mind was working, processing deals and threats and variables. Tonight his mind wasn't working. It was just running the same 3 seconds on a loop. Nia's face across the ballroom, the moment before she composed herself, the moment when her expression was still raw and unmanaged and told him everything he needed to know and several things he didn't want to know. He sat in the study of his penthouse apartment in Gangnam, in the dark, with a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking, and looked at the city the way he had looked at it for the past 9 years, as something he controlled and was trapped by simultaneously. The Kong Syndicate occupied most of his waking hours and a significant portion of his sleeping ones. It was an empire built over 3 generations, and it was his to run now because his father had spent the last 2 years progressively losing the ability to run anything, and because there was no one else. Because Jae-hyun was the only child, had been raised for exactly this purpose, had been shaped by his entire life into the specific tool this organization required. He thought about the engagement party, about Yeonji's face when she looked at him and asked who the woman was, about the politeness with which she had handled a situation that had to be at minimum confusing and at maximum genuinely painful. He thought about what she deserved and what he was giving her instead, and felt the specific low-grade shame of a man who has agreed to something he knows is wrong because the alternative requires more courage than he currently possesses. He picked up his phone, sent Sung-jin a message. Prepare a full briefing on Brooks quantum systems. Everything since founding. I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning. Then he put the phone down and thought about Nia's question. Not a question, a statement. I knew a boy who watched his family destroy mine and couldn't stop it. He had been 18 years old. He had been 18 years old and he had come home from a weekend in Jeju to find the housekeeper's quarters empty and his mother sitting in the main salon with the particular composed expression she wore when she had solved a problem. He had stood in the hallway outside the salon for 3 minutes before going in, and in those 3 minutes he had understood several things simultaneously. That Nia was gone, that his mother had made her go, and that if he walked into that salon and said the wrong thing, he would lose whatever leverage he had left in this family entirely, which was not much, and which he needed to protect his ability to eventually do things that mattered. That was what he had told himself. Standing in the hallway at 18 years old, heart doing something catastrophic inside his chest, he had told himself, protect your leverage, survive this, find her later. He had never found her. He had told himself he was waiting for the right moment, and the right moment never came. And the years went past, and the organization consumed everything. And then one day, he was 35 years old, and she was standing in his ballroom in a black dress, and it turned out that later, in the sense he had meant it at 18, didn't exist. He sat in the dark until 4 a.m., then showered and put on a suit and went to the office at 5, because that was the other thing you could do when you couldn't sleep and couldn't think and couldn't figure out how to be a person who had made the right choices. You could work, which was at least productive, which was at least something. The Monday meeting was bad in the way that things are bad when everyone is being extremely professional. Sungjin had prepared the 42nd floor conference room with the kind of detail that suggested he understood the situation was complicated. The good chairs rather than the standard ones, coffee from the building's executive kitchen rather than the floor's shared machine. The technical documentation organized in actual physical binders rather than just uploaded to the shared server. Small things. Careful things. Sungjin was, among his many other qualities, a man who paid close attention to when his employer needed the environment managed precisely. Nia arrived at 8:58 with 3 people. A Korean-American man in his late 30s, who she introduced as Dr. James Lim, lead architect, and 2 women in their early 30s, Priya Rao and Soo-min Han, senior engineers. They were sharp and prepared and had clearly worked together for years, moving through the technical conversation with the shorthand of a team that had solved hard problems together and knew each other's thinking. Jae-hyun noted it, the way Nia had built around herself people who were genuinely excellent, not just credentialed. It was a particular kind of leadership quality, the ability to attract real talent and keep it. He had 4 people on his side, his infrastructure director, 2 technical leads, and Sungjin. He did not participate in the technical portion of the meeting himself. That was not his role in these rooms. His role was to watch, to understand dynamics, to identify the pressure points that numbers and specifications couldn't capture. He sat at the end of the table and let his team work, and watched Nia run her side of the table with the particular efficiency of someone who knew exactly what they needed and had no interest in spending time on anything else. She did not look at him more than was professionally required. She directed questions to his infrastructure director when she had questions. She acknowledged his presence when introductions required it, and not otherwise. She was, in every observable way, exactly what she had said she would be on the terrace. A professional, here to do a job, treating him as the business counterpart he was. It was infuriating. It was also, he recognized, exactly the correct approach, and he respected it, which made it more infuriating. The meeting ran 2 hours and 20 minutes. It ended with a technical alignment document and a project timeline and a scheduled follow-up for Wednesday. Nia gathered her materials with the same efficiency that characterized everything else about her and her team, filed out ahead of her, and she paused at the door. The timeline is aggressive, she said, not specifically to him. Him, addressing the room. The government deadline doesn't move, Jae-hyun said. I know, I'm not complaining. I'm identifying that it's aggressive and that we'll need full cooperation from your infrastructure team. No delays on documentation, no committee approvals slowing down technical decisions. You'll have direct access. Anything you need from our team, you ask, you get it within 24 hours. She looked at him then, properly, for the first time since the meeting began, reading something in his face. Okay, she said, and left. Sungjin waited until the room was clear, then said, She's remarkable. Don't, Jae-hyun said. I'm making a professional observation. Make it somewhere else. Sungjin allowed himself the smallest possible smile, which was the only kind Sungjin ever permitted himself, and gathered his folders. Your mother called while the meeting was running. She wants dinner on Wednesday. Move it to Thursday. She'll ask why. Tell her I have a project conflict. Sungjin nodded. She's going to find out about the Brooks involvement in the Mirai contract. I know. It would be better if she heard it from you first. Jae-hyun looked at the door through which Nia had just exited. The room still smelled faintly of her perfume. Something clean and dark, nothing floral, which was consistent. I'll handle it, he said. He did not handle it. 4 days passed. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment, which was a habit he was apparently still capable of at 35. And in the meantime, the project moved forward with a velocity that told him Nia was not in Seoul to waste time. Her team worked 16-hour days. She worked longer. Twice he arrived at Kang Tower before 6 a.m. to find her already in the 42nd floor workspace they'd allocated for the Brooks Quantum team, sitting at a workstation with coffee going cold beside her and technical schematics open on 3 screens. The first time, he stopped in the doorway and she looked up, and there was a single unguarded second before her expression reset to professional, and in that second she looked exhausted and focused and alive in a way that made his chest do the thing it had been doing since the ballroom. "You're here early," he said. "I'm always here early." She turned back to the screen. "Your infrastructure team's security protocols have a gap in the data handoff layer. I need your director's cell number." He gave it to her. Left. Did not allow himself to stay. The second time he brought coffee, 2 cups, because it was before 6 and the kitchen wasn't staffed, and she looked at the cup he set beside her workstation for a long moment before picking it up. "Thank you," she said. "How's the gap?" "Closed. Found 2 more." "Serious?" "Patchable. I'm documenting them for your security team's benefit. They're not related to the Mirai project, but they should know." She glanced at him. "Do you want the report going to Sung Jin or your infrastructure director?" "Both." She nodded, turned back to the screen, and he stood there for approximately 3 seconds longer than was necessary before leaving. By the end of the first week, his mother knew. He was not surprised. Kang Mi-rae had built intelligence networks that most people assumed only existed in films, and she had been managing the edges of her son's life with surgical precision since he was old enough to have a life worth managing. She called him on Friday evening, and the call lasted 7 minutes, and it was not pleasant. "Nia Brooks," his mother said. The name landed like she was setting it on a table between them, carefully, deliberately, making sure he saw exactly what she thought she was placing. "She's the CEO of the company contracted for the Mirai project," he said. "The government selected her. It wasn't our choice." "You knew she would be involved and you didn't tell me." A pause. "I found out the night of the engagement party." "And you've said nothing for a week." "There was nothing to say. It's a business arrangement." "Don't treat me like one of your board members, Jae-hyun." His mother's voice had gone to the particular cold register that he had feared at 8 years old and had learned to recognize clearly by 18 as the signal that she was no longer arguing. She was deciding. "That girl and her mother are the past. A past that was handled. I will not have the stability of this family or this organization disrupted by—" "She's doing her job," Jae-hyun said. "I'm doing mine. The project takes 6 weeks. And then she goes back to America." "Yes." A long silence on the line. "I want her treated professionally and distantly," his mother said. "She is a vendor. She will be compensated appropriately for her work, and she will leave. If I find out there is anything beyond professional contact, good night, Yomioni." He ended the call, stood in his apartment looking at the city. His phone buzzed twice with follow-up messages from his mother that he didn't open. He thought about the word she had used. Handled. The way you handled a problem. The way you handled something that was in your way. Nia and her mother handled. He sat with that word for a long time. The unraveling started in the second week, on a Tuesday evening, in the most ordinary possible way. Overtime in the conference room, a project complication requiring both of their presences, and a dinner order because it was 8 p.m. and neither of them had eaten. The team had gone home. Sung Jin had a family event. It was Jae-hyun and Nia and technical schematics and Thai food from the place 3 blocks over that his assistant had recommended, and it turned out Nia ordered the same thing he did, which was a small and meaningless fact that lodged itself in his chest regardless. They ate on opposite sides of the conference table. They talked about the project. They talked about it efficiently and productively, and then the project conversation ran out and the food was mostly gone, and neither of them left. "You're good at this," she said finally. "Not the project." She gestured at the building, the city, the general largeness of what he ran. "I thought you might be. You were always—" She stopped. "Always what?" "Focused," she said. "Even at 18, you were already someone who understood how systems worked, how people worked." A pause. "I just didn't think the system you'd end up running would be this particular one." "Neither did I," he said. She looked at him. "Did you have another option?" "Not one I knew how to take." "What would you have done if the syndicate hadn't been there?" The question surprised him. Not because it was inappropriate. They were past professional only at this point. Both of them knew it, though neither had said so. But because he had not been asked it in a long time. Possibly never by someone who actually wanted to know. "Architecture," he said. "Real architecture. I used to design buildings. In my sketchbooks." Something moved across her face. A softness. Gone before he could read it properly. "I remember those sketchbooks," she said. You looked through them without asking. You left them out. That's not the same as giving permission. You knew I would look, she said, and smiled. The first real smile he had seen from her since the ballroom. Unguarded, brief, gone fast. But it had been there. He looked at his food container rather than at her face. I did, he admitted. They sat in the quiet of the conference room, 42 floors above the city, while the silence between them did what silences do when they are full of things that have not been said. It accumulated. It changed the pressure of the room. It made ordinary things, like the distance across the table, feel like choices. I need to know something, Nia said. Her voice had gone quiet. Not soft. She wasn't doing soft, he understood that now. She did quiet as a different register, as precision rather than vulnerability. About that night, when we left, Taehyun put down his chopsticks. Your mother came to our quarters at 11 p.m., Nia said. She had an envelope. She told my mother it was a severance payment, a generous one, and that the family was downsizing the household staff. She said we had until morning. A pause. My mother asked if you knew. Your mother said you had approved the decision. The room went very still. She told you I approved it, he said. Nia watched his face. Yes. The rage was there. Not hot, not explosive, but cold and structural, the kind that comes from understanding exactly how something was constructed. Jae-hyun had spent years being angry at his mother in a generalized way, a way that coexisted with love and obligation and the complicated arithmetic of family. This was different. This was specific. This was the particular cold clarity of learning the exact shape of a lie that had cost him something irreplaceable. I came home from Jeju to find you gone, he said. I didn't know she was going to do it. I didn't approve anything. Nia did not respond immediately. She held his gaze for a long time, reading him the way she had always read him. Not credulously, not with the automatic trust of someone who wanted to believe, but with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned that the truth and the convenient story could look identical until you looked from the right angle. Your mother is very convincing, Nia said. Yes, he said. She is. Another silence. This one felt different. Not accumulated, but released. Something shifting in the pressure between them. I spent 9 years believing you let us go, she said, that when it came down to it, we weren't worth fighting for. Nia, I'm not asking you to fix that, she said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I'm telling you what I believed because... She stopped. Reorganized. Because you said you wanted to know what kind of man you became, and I think you should know what kind of man I thought you were. He absorbed that. It was not kind. It was not meant to be kind. It was the specific honesty of someone who had decided that politeness was no longer a useful tool. I should have found you, he said. I should have looked harder. I know that. You were 18. That stopped being a sufficient reason about 6 years in. She looked at him for a long moment. The city hummed 42 stories below them. This is a complicated situation, she said. Yes. I'm here for 6 weeks. I know. And you're engaged. The word landed between them. He didn't move, didn't look away. I'm aware, he said. She gathered her project materials in the careful, methodical way she did everything. Each document placed in order, each folder closed properly, and stood up. Monday, she said. 9 a.m. Nia. She paused. What you said. About what kind of man you thought I was. He kept his voice level, which cost something. I'm going to fix that. She looked at him over her shoulder. Something in her face. The particular expression of a woman who wants to believe something and is refusing to do it too fast. Don't make me a promise you built on a feeling, she said. I've had enough of those. She walked out. The door closed. The conference room was empty and overlit and smelled of Thai food and the ghost of a conversation that had just changed everything. Jae-hyun sat alone at the head of the table for a long time. His phone lit up on the surface beside him. A message from his mother. I trust you're being sensible. The Seo family is expecting the engagement confirmation in the press next week. He looked at the message for a long moment. Then he put the phone face down on the table. He reached for his glass of water and his hand was steady, completely, deliberately steady, as he raised it to his mouth. He was making a decision, he understood. not yet in the articulated, spoken, irreversible way, but in the way that things begin before they begin, in the quiet space before the action, where the man knows what he is going to do even before he has admitted it to himself. Outside, Soul burned in the dark below the window. Indifferent. Enormous. Unaware that something had just cracked open on the 42nd floor, something that, once open, was not going to close again. Whatever came next was going to cost him. He was 35 years old, and it had been 9 years, and the cost of the thing he was going to do was going to be enormous, and he sat in the empty conference room in the dark city and discovered, with a kind of exhausted relief, that he didn't care. He had been inside the gilded cage for 17 years. He had called it discipline, obligation, leadership. He had called it everything except what it was. What it was fear. And Nia Brooks had walked back into his city and looked at him across a ballroom with 9 years of survival in her eyes, and the fear, quietly and without ceremony, had begun to lose its grip. 3 floors below, in the elevator descending toward the lobby, Nia stood alone and held her project folder against her chest and breathed. Just breathed. Her team would be at the hotel. She had calls to make. New York, her board, her VP of operations who texted at all hours. She had 6 weeks of work ahead, and a government contract that mattered, and a career she had built from nothing on a continent she had arrived in, with 1 suitcase and a wound and a mother who worked double shifts so she could study. She had not survived all of that to lose her mind in an elevator over a man who dropped his champagne glass. The elevator stopped on the 28th floor. The doors opened. Chae Hyun's mother stepped in. Kang Mi-rae was 61 years old and looked exactly like a woman who had been deciding outcomes for other people her entire life. Slim, immaculate, with the particular stillness of someone who had never, not once, been uncertain about where she stood. She looked at Nia with recognition so immediate and complete that it was almost impressive. No hesitation, no pretense of a social recovery, just the full beam attention of someone who had known this moment was coming and had prepared for it. "Miss Brooks," she said. The elevator doors closed. "Mrs. Kang," Nia said. 28 floors of descent. Neither of them moved. "I understand you're doing excellent work on the Mirai project," Kang Mi-rae said. Her English was perfect, unhurried, with the cadence of someone who had selected each word 3 sentences ahead. "My son speaks highly of your team's technical capabilities." "We're doing our jobs," Nia said. "Indeed." A pause that felt architectural. "I wonder if I might buy you coffee tomorrow morning. As the family hosting your company's work here, I'd like to express our appreciation personally." Nia looked at the elevator doors. "I appreciate the offer," she said. 8 a.m., Kang Mi-rae said. "The lobby cafe. I'll have a table reserved." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. "Good evening, Miss Brooks," Kang Mi-rae said and stepped out first. Nia stood in the elevator for 2 seconds after she left, which was long enough to understand several things at once. That Chae Hyun's mother had not come to that elevator by accident, that the coffee invitation was not an invitation, and that whatever had cracked open in the conference room 42 floors above had just become visible to the one person with both the motive and the capacity to close it permanently. The doors began to slide shut. Nia put her hand out and stopped them. She stepped out into the lobby. She was going to that coffee meeting. The lobby cafe at 8 a.m. was quiet, in the way expensive places are quiet. Not empty, but carefully arranged so that conversations didn't carry, so that the distance between tables felt like privacy rather than architecture. Kang Mi-rae was already seated when Nia arrived, which Nia had expected. Women like Kang Mi-rae were always already seated. They arrived early so that you walked toward them, so that the geometry of the room established who was waiting for whom before a word was spoken. Nia had been up since 5. She had reviewed the project files, responded to her New York board's overnight emails, and spent 45 minutes in the hotel gym doing the kind of workout that was less about fitness and more about getting her body to behave, to stop the low-level hum of adrenaline that had been running since the elevator the night before, since the conference room, since the ballroom, since all of it. It hadn't entirely worked, but she was here, and she was composed, and she was wearing a charcoal blazer and flat shoes because she had learned years ago that the right clothes could do a portion of the emotional labor for you. She sat down across from Chae Hyun's mother without being invited to sit. A small thing. Kang Mi-rae noticed it, Her expression didn't change, but she set her teacup down with a fractional pause that told Nia everything she needed to know about how this conversation had been scripted in the older woman's mind, and how quickly that script was already adjusting. "You look well," Kang Mi-rae said. "The years have been good to you." "They've been instructive," Nia said. A server appeared. Nia ordered black coffee without looking at the menu, and the server disappeared, and they were alone in the particular way two people are alone when every surrounding sound has become irrelevant. "I'll be direct," Kang Mi-rae said, which was what people said when they intended to be precisely as indirect as required. "I have great respect for what you've built. Brooks Quantum Systems is a genuinely impressive organization. The work your team is doing on the Mirai project is, my son tells me, exceptional." "Your son is not involved in the technical evaluation," Nia said, "so I'm not sure what he's told you." Kang Mi-rae paused. A real pause this time, not architectural. She was recalibrating. "He pays attention. He always did." The words were out before Nia decided to say them. They landed in the space between the two women and stayed there, specific and irretrievable. Kang Mi-rae looked at her for a long moment, and what Nia saw in the older woman's face was not hostility, not yet, but something more uncomfortable than hostility. Recognition. "Miss Brooks," Kang Mi-rae said, "you are a sophisticated woman. You understand that there are systems that have nothing to do with personal feeling, family structures, obligations, arrangements that protect large numbers of people and their livelihoods. You built a company. You understand how decisions are made at scale." Nia's coffee arrived. She wrapped both hands around the cup. Didn't drink. "I understand how decisions are made," she said. "Then you understand that what is happening, the proximity, the daily contact, a slight pause, history between you and my son, is a disruption that I cannot allow, not out of cruelty, out of necessity." Nia looked at her. "You came to our quarters at 11 p.m., Nia said, 17 years ago. My mother opened the door in her work clothes because she hadn't finished her shift yet. You handed her an envelope and told her the family was downsizing staff. She kept her voice level. It cost her. You told her Jae-hyun had approved the decision." Kang Mi-rae did not look away. "My mother spent the next 3 hours packing everything we owned," Nia continued. "She didn't cry. Not that night. She was too busy making phone calls, finding a place to stay, figuring out how to get us to the airport by morning. She didn't cry until we were on the plane. I was sitting next to her and she turned toward the window and her shoulders were shaking and I was 17 years old and I didn't know how to help her, so I just put my hand on her arm and held it the entire flight." She paused. "That was the moment I decided I was going to build something so large that no one would ever be able to hand my family an envelope and tell them to leave by morning." The cafe was quiet around them. Kang Mi-rae had gone very still. "I'm not asking you to apologize," Nia said. "I'm not here for that. I'm here because you asked me here, and I came because I wanted you to understand something before you begin whatever campaign you've prepared." She finally picked up her coffee. Drank. "I am not 17 years old. I am not my mother in work clothes at 11 p.m. I have a $300 million company and a government contract that your son's organization needs, and I have nothing to lose from this project except time. So whatever you're planning, be sure about it, because if you come at me, I won't leave quietly." Kang Mi-rae was quiet for a long moment. Something moved in her face. Not softness, not defeat, but a kind of recalculation that was almost visible, like watching someone rebuild a position in real time. "You believe my son is in love with you," she said. "I don't think anything about your son's feelings. I think he's running an organization under tremendous pressure, and I think he's in an engagement he didn't choose, and I think that's your business, and his, not mine." "And yet you stayed on the terrace with him for 30 minutes the night of the party." Nia set her cup down. "Were you watching?" "I protect my family, yes." "Then you already know the answer to your question, and you didn't need to have coffee with me." She pushed her chair back, stood, looked down at Kang Mi-rae with the specific composure of a woman who has learned that the most powerful thing you can do in a room is refuse to need anything from it. "Thank you for the coffee," Nia said. "I'll see your team at the 9 o'clock project check-in." She left. She walked through the lobby without hurrying, stepped outside into the early morning air, stood on the sidewalk for exactly 30 seconds, breathing, eyes on the mid-distance where the city was doing what cities do in the morning. Waking up, indifferent, enormous, continuous. Then she took out her phone and called Dr. James Lim. "Change in plan," she said when he answered. "I want the project timeline compressed. What would it take to finish in 4 weeks instead of 6? A long pause on the line. "Nia, what would it take, James?" He exhaled. "Every person on the team working at maximum capacity. No weekends. Probably some nights. Can we do it?" Another pause. "If Kang's infrastructure team matches our pace, which would require their director to—" "I'll handle the director," she said. "Get the team together at 8:30 before the 9 o'clock check-in." She ended the call, stood on the sidewalk for one more second, then she went back inside. Jae-hyun found out about the compressed timeline at the 9 a.m. check-in when Nia put the revised schedule on the screen and walked the room through it with the brisk efficiency of someone who had already made the decision and was now delivering a briefing rather than opening a discussion. He sat at the end of the table and watched her and kept his face neutral, which was something he was good at and which had never felt more effortful. She was accelerating, pulling toward the door. 4 weeks instead of 6, 2 less weeks of daily contact, 2 less weeks of 8 p.m. conference rooms and Thai food. And conversations that kept going past the project and into the other thing, the thing that neither of them had named and that she was now clearly, methodically trying to outrun. He knew why. He didn't need to be told. His mother had requested the coffee meeting. Sungjin had flagged it. And he had told himself he was going to let it happen, that his mother was entitled to manage her concerns, that Nia was an adult who could handle a conversation. He had told himself these things, and they had all been, in their individual ways, reasonable, and they had all been, in aggregate, a failure of nerve. After the check-in ended, when the room had mostly cleared, he said, "A word." Nia looked at him. Her team filed out with the careful unobtrusiveness of people who had decided not to notice things. When it was just the two of them, she said, "The timeline is achievable." "I'm not talking about the timeline." "I know." He stood up, moved to the window. The city was sharp and clear below, the sort of morning that made Seoul look like it had been built to be seen from above. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing I wasn't expecting." "Nia, she told me you had obligations. She told me there were systems in place that protected a lot of people. She reminded me, without quite saying it, that she still had levers she could pull." A pause. "And I reminded her that I'm not the same person she put on a plane 17 years ago." He turned from the window. She was standing by the table with her arms at her sides, and she was doing the thing she always did, maintaining the expression and the posture and the composure, but her jaw was tight, and he had known her face for long enough to read the places where the composure was costing her. "I should have told her to stay out of it," he said. "You should have," she agreed. "I thought—" He stopped. "You thought you could manage it," she said. "You thought you could manage her and manage the project and manage whatever this is." She gestured at the space between them. "Simultaneously. Like everything is a system that responds to management." She tilted her head. "You've been running things for so long, you've forgotten that some things don't respond to management, Jae-hyun. Some things just happen, and you have to be present for them." He looked at her. "That's the most words you've said to me directly since the engagement party," he said. "I'm building up to something." "What?" She looked at him for a long moment, and then she said, "My mother is dead." The room went very quiet. "She died 4 years ago," Nia said. Her voice was still level, still controlled, but there was a quality to it now. A density, like something under significant compression. Cervical cancer, stage 3, diagnosed late because she'd spent years not going to doctors because she couldn't afford to. And by the time she had insurance, by the time my company was stable enough that she didn't have to work anymore, and she could actually take care of herself, it was already late. She paused. She died in a hospital in Boston. I was there. She didn't get to see Brooks Quantum go public. She didn't get to see any of it. Jae-hyun stood at the window and felt something inside him go very still, and then begin slowly and devastatingly to understand the full shape of what his family had done. She worked double shifts for 11 years, Nia said. So I could go to MIT, so I could build the company. She worked herself into the kind of exhaustion that makes your body stop fighting things it should be able to fight. She looked at him directly. Your mother put her on a plane with an envelope and told her the family was downsizing staff, And she worked double shifts for 11 years, and she died without seeing any of it matter. He didn't speak. There was nothing to say that was not inadequate. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Nia said. I'm telling you because you said you wanted to know what kind of man you became, and I think you should understand what it cost. Not what it cost me, what it cost her. She picked up her folder from the table. I'll be at my workstation if there are technical questions. She walked out. He stood at the window and looked at the city and felt the familiar cold settle in his chest, the one he had been living with for 9 years and had never correctly identified until this moment. He had called it discipline, control, the emotional management required to run what he ran. He understood now, in the window's reflection, in the way his own face looked back at him, blank and composed and deeply exhausted, that it was not discipline. It was the shape grief made when a man refused to acknowledge it. He called his mother that afternoon. Not from the office, from the underground parking structure, alone, where the concrete walls ate the sound and no one passed through without clearance. Her mother is dead, he said when she answered. A pause. I see. She worked double shifts for 11 years, Eomeoni, after you put her on a plane. Jaehyun, did you know? When you did it? Did you think about what would happen to them? His mother's voice, when it came, was neither cold nor defensive. It was something he hadn't heard from her in a long time, careful. The voice of a woman who knew she was on ground that could shift. I thought about what would happen to this family, she said. I thought about what would happen to you, what that girl represented, the distraction, the attachment, the exposure it created at a time when your father was already... She stopped. I made a decision that I believed protected the family. I stand by that. She told me you told her mother that I approved it. Silence. You told her I had agreed to it, he said. You told a woman who had done nothing wrong, who had worked in this house, who had been nothing but decent, that her daughter's relationship with my son had been ended with my knowledge and my approval. You made her believe I had decided she wasn't worth keeping. I needed her to leave without making it a fight. I know, clean and quick and surgical. The rage in his chest was cold and measured, which was worse than heat. What did it cost you to say that? Nothing. It cost you nothing. It cost them everything. This conversation is not negotiable, he said. I'm not asking for your perspective on the decision. I'm telling you that I understand now completely what it cost. And I'm telling you that the engagement with the Seo family needs to be reconsidered. A silence that had weight. You're not serious, his mother said. When am I not serious? Jaehyun, listen to yourself. Because a woman you knew as a teenager walked back into... Because I have spent 17 years doing what this family required, he said. Every decision, every compromise, every obligation I accepted because the organization required it, or the family required it, or you required it. I accepted all of it. A pause. I need you to hear me clearly. I will fulfill every professional obligation to the Seo family. I will ensure their business interests are properly handled and that they are not harmed by any transition. But I am not marrying Yeonji. That is no longer available as an option. The silence that followed was the longest of the call. If you do this, his mother said slowly, you need to understand what you are doing, not just to the Seo Alliance, to the council, to the families who are watching to see whether you are as strong as your father was. Any sign of instability, any public fracture, will be read as weakness. And weakness in this position is dangerous, I know. People will move. Let them. Jaehyun, her voice dropped. For the first time in the conversation, it lost its structure and became something closer to what it had been when he was very young. Not cold, not strategic, but frightened. Frightened in the specific way of a woman who had made every hard choice she'd ever made because she was terrified of what would happen if she didn't. I'm asking you to think about this. Not for me. For everything we have built. I am thinking about it, he said. I've been thinking about it for 9 years. He ended the call. Sat in the parking structure for a long time. The concrete around him was cold and indifferent and smelled of oil and exhaust, and the fluorescent lights above him made everything look like the aftermath of something. He took out his phone, opened his messages, typed to Sung Jin. Clear my schedule for the rest of the day. I need 3 hours. No calls. Then he typed a second message to a different contact. his personal attorney, not the syndicate's legal team. I need a meeting tomorrow regarding the CO engagement documentation. Private. He sent it, put the phone in his pocket, sat in the quiet of the underground structure, and breathed. The decision had been building for longer than he had admitted. Maybe since the ballroom. Maybe since the terrace. Maybe since the conference room last Tuesday, and the Thai food and the way she had smiled, brief and real and gone, when he said, "You knew I would look." Or maybe since he was 18 years old in a hallway outside his mother's salon, counting the cost of a choice he had told himself he'd come back to. He was not coming back to it. He was doing it now, whatever it cost. But he found her at 7 that evening, not in the conference room, not in the 42nd floor workspace, in the ground floor lobby, about to leave, her project bag over one shoulder, looking at her phone with the particular focused frown of someone dealing with a problem that existed in a time zone 8 hours away. She looked up when he stopped in front of her. "Not a project question," he said. She lowered her phone, waited. I called off the engagement. The lobby was busy around them. The after-work hour, people coming and going, the general motion of a building that never fully stopped. But between the two of them, in the 3 feet of space between where he stood and where she stood, everything went very still. "What?" she said. "I told my mother tonight. I'm meeting my attorney tomorrow to review the documentation." He kept his voice level, not to perform calm, but because he was genuinely calm. The specific calm that comes after a decision is made and the panic of indecision is over. "I wanted you to know directly, not through Sung Jin, not through whatever my mother's version of it will be when it reaches you, from me." Nia stared at him. Something crossed her face. Not joy, not the relief of a plot resolved, but something harder and more complicated than that. Shock, maybe. And underneath the shock, the specific fear of someone who has been handed something they stopped believing was coming. "Jae-hyun," her voice was low. "Don't do this because of me." "It's not only because of you," he said. "I should have done it 6 weeks ago. I should have done it before that. The engagement was wrong from the beginning, and I agreed to it because I had stopped believing my own life was something I was allowed to want things from." He paused. "You walking back into this city reminded me that I used to want things. That's on you, yes, but the decision is mine." She looked at him for a long moment. "This is going to cause problems," she said. "Yes, serious ones. Your council, the rival families. Your mother said—" "I know what my mother said. Jae-hyun." She stepped slightly closer, lowering her voice, and the proximity did what proximity always did in these moments, made the space between them feel charged, specific, heavy with everything that had been left in it. "If you do this publicly, if it comes out in the press before you've managed the fallout with the CO family and the council, they will read it as instability, and people who are waiting for you to show instability will move," he said. My mother used the same word. "Because they're right." Her eyes were searching his face. "I'm not asking you to stay engaged. I'm asking you to be careful, to do this in the right order." He looked at her. 9 years of imagining this conversation, and it was nothing like what he had imagined. Not romantic, not resolved, not clean. It was her standing in a lobby looking at him like a woman who understood the stakes clearly and was frightened on his behalf, and him standing across from her understanding that this was what love actually looked like when it was between real people in real situations. Not relief, not ease. The willingness to be afraid for someone else. "Tell me one thing," he said. She waited. "Do you want this?" A pause that lasted long enough to be honest. "I want to not be afraid to want it," she said. "I'm not there yet." "That's enough," he said. She shook her head slightly, almost involuntarily. Not refusal, but the physical response to something that was too much and not enough simultaneously. "If your mother retaliates," she started. His phone rang. Not his regular phone. The second one, the one that rang only in specific categories of emergency, the one that Sung Jin had the number to, and 2 other people, and no one else. He held up one hand, turned slightly, answered. Sung Jin's voice was stripped of its usual careful modulation. "You need to come to the office. Now." "What happened?" "Director Baek made a move tonight. He's called an emergency council session for tomorrow morning. He's bringing a vote of no confidence. A pause. He has 7 of the 12 council seats confirmed. He announced it 40 minutes ago. Jae-hyun went still. Jae-hyun, see? Sung-jin's voice dropped further. Someone told him about the engagement call. About your conversation with your mother this afternoon. Someone inside the family passed it in under 3 hours. The lobby around him continued its motion. People walking, conversations, the indifferent normal operation of a building in a city and a world that didn't know or care that something had just been set in motion that could not be stopped. Jae-hyun looked at Nia. She had read his face. Her own face had gone still and careful, and in her eyes was the particular expression of a woman who understood without being told that what she was looking at was the moment a man steps off solid ground, and the ground does not come back. "I have to go," he said. "I know," she said. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he walked toward the exit, fast and deliberate, already restructuring, already calculating. And behind him, without turning around, he heard her say his name. He stopped. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said quietly, "don't disappear on me again." He didn't turn around, but he stood still for 1 second, absorbing it, letting it land somewhere it would hold. Then he walked out into the Seoul night, and the door closed behind him, and somewhere across the city, in a room he hadn't been invited to, 12 men were deciding the future of everything he had spent his life building. And at least one of them was doing it with information that had come from inside his own walls. The Kang Syndicate's council chamber was on the 54th floor of a building that did not appear in any public directory, in a district of Seoul where the streets were wide and clean, and the buildings had the particular blankness of structures that had been designed to be unremembered. Jae-hyun had been in this room 47 times in his life. He knew the weight of the chairs, the acoustics of the ceiling, the way the room's single floor-to-ceiling window framed the city like a threat rather than a view. He had sat at the head of its table for 3 years and watched men twice his age try to read his face and fail. He arrived at 11 p.m. to find Sung-jin waiting in the corridor outside, which meant the situation was worse than the phone call had conveyed because Sung-jin only waited in corridors when he had information he didn't want transmitted electronically. "Tell me," Jae-hyun said. Sung-jin fell into step beside him, voice low, eyes forward. "Beck has 9 seats, not 7. 2 more flipped in the last 2 hours, Chairman Lim and Director Oh. Both of them were solid 3 weeks ago. What changed?" "Money. Beck's been running a quiet acquisition for months, buying loyalty through subsidiary contracts, construction bids, distribution rights. He's been building this for at least 6 months. A pause. This was not a reaction to the engagement call. This was already in motion. The engagement call was an acceleration, not a cause. Jae-hyun absorbed this. They reached the corridor's end. He stopped. "Who passed him the information about my call with my mother?" Sung-jin hesitated. The hesitation lasted exactly 1 second, which on Sung-jin's face was equivalent to a long and complicated speech. "Tell me," Jae-hyun said again. "The call was made from the parking structure," Sung-jin said. "Your personal phone, not the secure line." He paused. "The security team's monitoring log shows a secondary device active in that zone during the call, a device registered to the building's executive access system." Another pause. "Registered to your mother's assistant." The corridor was silent. "My mother," Jae-hyun said. "I don't know if she intended—" "She didn't need to intend it. She needed Baek to move fast enough to stop me." The call gave him the pretext. He turned toward the chamber door. His voice was completely flat. She handed him the weapon. Sung-jin said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. Jae-hyun pushed open the chamber door. Shabak. There were 11 men in the room. Baek Sung-chul sat at the far end of the table, not at the head, which was Jae-hyun's seat, but 2 positions down, which was a deliberate choice, a statement that said he was not yet claiming the seat, but was close enough that everyone present understood he intended to. He was 62 years old, thick-set, with the hands of someone who had spent his early years doing physical work before the syndicate elevated him, and he had a way of sitting that suggested he was always lower to the ground than he appeared, always more rooted, always harder to move than you calculated. He looked at Jae-hyun when he entered, didn't stand. None of them stood, which was the first formal signal. The small, deliberate discourtesy that told him the room had already made its decision and was now performing the process of making it. Jae-hyun sat at the head of the table. He did not look at Baek. He looked at each man in turn, taking 30 seconds to do it, letting the silence work for him the way it always had. "Gentlemen," he said. Baek said, "We'll dispense with the formalities. You know why we're here." "I know why you're here," Jae-hyun said. "I'm less certain everyone else does." A slight shift in the room. Baek's jaw tightened fractionally. "The motion on the table," Baek said, "is a review of current leadership's fitness to manage the organization's interests. Specifically, regarding the proposed dissolution of the CO engagement, which represents a strategic alliance that took 14 months to negotiate and which 3 of our most critical financial positions depend on." He looked around the table. 9 members have confirmed support for the review. "We have quorum." "You have quorum for a review," Jae-hyun said. "You don't have quorum for removal. That requires 10. "We have 9 confirmed," Baek said. "The 10th is a formality." "Nothing in this room is a formality." Baek looked at him steadily. "You canceled an engagement that stabilizes the Busan shipping corridor, the Incheon warehousing contracts, and the CO family's political cover for our northern operations. You did it in a phone call, based on—" He paused, and his voice took on the particular weight of a man delivering a prepared line, a personal relationship with a foreign business contractor. The room was very quiet. "You've been monitoring my communications," Jae-hyun said. "We've been protecting the organization's interests, which is what this council exists to do when individual leadership fails to prioritize them." Baek leaned forward slightly. "The woman, Jae-hyun. The Brooks woman. You've been seen. The terrace. The conference room. The lobby last night. People talk. People in my employ talk to you. People in this organization understand where their loyalty lies." Jae-hyun looked at him. He was aware of his own heartbeat. Not racing, not elevated, just present, steady. The physical fact of a body that was functioning under considerable pressure and had been trained to function regardless. He was aware of the 11 faces watching him, reading him, calculating what they saw. "I want the source," Jae-hyun said. "The person who relayed my private conversation. I want a name." "That's not relevant to—" "It's the only thing relevant to this conversation." His voice was quiet. "Because if there is a person in this organization, in this room, who has been feeding information to a council member running a covert accumulation of voting rights, then the question before this table is not my fitness for leadership. It's the integrity of the organization's internal security." He let that sit. "If Baek has been buying council positions for 6 months using subsidiary contracts, then every business decision made in that period is potentially compromised. Every contract, every alliance, every deal that was made while he was quietly rerouting loyalty." He looked around the table. "You want to talk about fitness for leadership? Let's talk about that." The room shifted. Not dramatically. These were not men who shifted dramatically. But the particular stillness that had been weighted against Jae-hyun reorganized slightly, redistributed, became less certain of its own direction. Baek's face had gone careful. "You're deflecting. I'm identifying a structural problem that predates this meeting by 6 months, and that will outlast this meeting by however long you intend to run the organization if you take it." He turned to face Baek directly. "You've been here 31 years. You know what happens when the internal intelligence breaks down. You've seen it. We both have." A silence. Then Chairman Lim, who was 70 and had been in the organization since before Jae-hyun was born, said, "The engagement." Everyone looked at him. "The engagement," Lim said again. He had a voice like gravel rolled slowly, and he used it rarely, which meant the room treated it as significant. "Is it dissolved or is it under review?" Jae-hyun looked at him. "It is my intention to dissolve it." "Your intention," Lim said, "not a completed action." A pause. "Not yet completed," Jae-hyun said. Lim nodded slowly. "Then there is time." He looked at Baek. "A no-confidence vote on an intention is premature. We would be removing leadership based on a phone call, not an action. That sets a precedent none of us want to live under." He looked back at Jae-hyun. "The council wants reassurance. about the CO Alliance, about the Northern operations, about the organizational stability going forward. A pause. Give us that reassurance. In this room. Tonight. It was an opening. Jae-hyun understood it as such. Not a rescue, not a reprieve, but a crack in the wall through which something might be negotiated. Lim was not an ally. He was a pragmatist who understood that a destabilized leadership transition would cost everyone at this table more than a managed recalibration. Jae-hyun looked around the room. 9 faces. Some of them men he had known his entire life. Some of them men who had watched him grow up in the corridors of this organization, who had attended his father's birthday celebrations and his mother's formal dinners, and who had said, at various times and with various degrees of sincerity, that they believed in his leadership. The SEO Alliance will be honored, he said carefully. The business interests will be protected. I give you my word on that. Beck's eyes narrowed slightly. He had heard the construction of the sentence, what it said and what it didn't say. And the engagement itself, Beck said. Jae-hyun met his gaze. That is a personal matter. In this organization, Beck said, nothing is personal. Everything that matters is personal, Jae-hyun said. That's why you've been afraid of it your whole career. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. Beck's face had gone a particular shade of controlled, the specific color of a man who has been read accurately in public and cannot respond to it without confirming the reading. Lim spoke again. We will table the vote until the end of the month. Jae-hyun will present a formal stability plan to the council, financial projections, the CO transition structure if the engagement is dissolved, and a security audit of the last 6 months of internal communications. He looked at Beck. All council members will cooperate fully with the audit. It was not a victory, it was a delay. But in the geography of this particular night, a delay was enough. To. He left the building at 12:40 a.m. and stood on the empty street and called Sung Jin. The vote is tabled, he said. End of the month. That buys time, Sung Jin said. It buys 30 days. I need the internal security audit started tonight. I want every communication log from the last 6 months pulled and cross-referenced. And I need to know, specifically, the full record of contact between Baek Sung-chul and the subsidiary contractors he's been using to buy votes. That will take as long as it takes. Start tonight. He paused. And I need my mother's assistant's device access pulled and reviewed. Full record. A silence on Sung Jin's end. Jae-hyun-si, your mother... I know, he said. Do it anyway. He ended the call. Stood on the empty street for a moment. The city at 1 a.m. was quieter, but not quiet. Seoul never went fully quiet, just shifted registers, became something lower and more continuous. He looked up at the building he had just left. 54 floors of concrete and history and obligation, all of it pressing down. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, but the format was one he recognized, used by specific contacts who communicated through rotation channels when information was sensitive. He opened it. The council meeting was not the main event. Beck filed a regulatory complaint with the Financial Supervisory Service this afternoon, 3 hours before the council session, anonymously. The complaint identifies specific transactions in the Kang Corporate Division's Mirai project financing as potentially fraudulent. The FSS will be required to investigate. Formal notice likely within 48 hours. If the investigation proceeds, the Mirai contract is suspended pending review. Brooks Quantum's involvement becomes a liability. Jae-hyun read the message twice. Then he stood on the street in the middle of the night and understood, completely and without space for denial, what had just happened. Beck had not been running one operation. He had been running 3 simultaneously. The council vote, the intelligence leak through Jae-hyun's mother's assistant, and a regulatory attack on the Mirai project itself. The council meeting was meant to occupy Jae-hyun while the regulatory filing landed. By the time he understood the geometry, all 3 vectors would already be in motion, and there would be no position from which he could address them all. And Naya. If the FSS suspended the Mirai contract pending a fraud investigation, Nia's company's involvement became, at minimum, a reputational risk. The kind of risk that board members noticed. The kind of risk that showed up in press coverage. The kind of risk that, if it wasn't handled fast and cleanly, could attach itself to Brooks Quantum's name in ways that took years to remove. Beck had found the one lever that was not about Jae-hyun at all. He had found the thing that was not the organization, not the council, not the family. The thing that Jae-hyun could not calculate out of, because you could not calculate your way out of another person being hurt. He stood on the street and breathed through his nose, 4 counts in, 4 out, the way he had trained himself to do when he needed his brain to work faster than his anger. He needed to think. He needed to be ahead of this before the FSS notice arrived, before Naya's board started asking questions, before Baek's version of events became the only version circulating. He needed to tell her. He called her at 1:15 a.m., and she answered on the second ring, which told him she hadn't been sleeping either. "There's a problem," he said. A pause. "I'm listening." He told her. All of it. The regulatory filing, the Mirai contract exposure, the timeline. He did it in under 3 minutes, clean and specific, no cushioning. She deserved the unpadded version. When he finished, the line was silent for long enough that he checked it was still connected. "He filed it this afternoon," she said. "Yes." "While you were in the council meeting?" "Yes." Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice had a quality he had not heard from her before. Not anger, not shock, but something colder than both. The voice of a person doing very fast calculations in the dark. "If the FSS opens a formal investigation, we have to disclose to our board within 24 hours, she said. "That's non-negotiable, but it's in our corporate governance charter. Once we disclose, the board will require us to suspend active work on the Mirai project pending legal review." A pause. "Which means Baek doesn't need to win the council vote. He just needs the investigation to open. The contract suspension does the damage by itself." "I know." "Kamamo. Kismamimemo." "I can challenge the filing if I can demonstrate it was made in bad faith, retaliatory, politically motivated. The FSS has discretion to delay opening a formal investigation pending their own review of the complaint's validity." He paused. "But I need documentation. I need a paper trail showing Beck's council accumulation and the timing correlation between his activities and the regulatory filing. I need it before the 48-hour window closes. Can you get it? I have people working on it now." He stopped. "Nia, I need you to know the project, your company's involvement. I will not let this attach to your name, whatever it takes." "That's not—" She stopped. "Don't make this about protecting me. Make it about solving the problem. They're the same problem." A pause. "Jae-hyun." Her voice had changed again, quieter, stripped of the logistics, down to something more basic. "Who gave Baek the ammunition? Who has been close enough to your operations for 6 months to build this kind of case?" He didn't answer immediately. "Someone inside," she said. "Close inside." "Yes." "Do you know who?" He looked at the building across the street. A window on the 20th floor, light on, someone working late or unable to sleep or simply existing in the way the city kept making people exist. Continuously, without pause, without consideration for what was falling apart at street level. "I have a strong indication," he said. "Tell me." "Not over the phone." A silence. "I'll come to you," she said. "It's 1 a.m. I know what time it is. Her voice was firm, no negotiation in it. Tell me where you are, he told her. 15 minutes later, her car pulled up. Not a hired car, she was driving herself, which he noted because it meant she had wanted to move without a driver knowing the destination. She stepped out in the clothes she'd been wearing earlier, no concession to the hour, and she looked at him across the roof of the car with the expression of someone who has made a decision about how much they are willing to be inside a situation and has decided fully. Get in, she said. We're not doing this on the street. They drove. She drove, he directed, out of the central district toward the river, to the kind of place where there were no cameras and very few people, and the conversations you had stayed where you had them. She parked along the bank and turned off the engine, and the river was dark and moving beyond the windshield. Tell me, she said. The device that monitored my call with my mother, he said. It was registered to my mother's assistant, a woman named Park Ji-soo, who has been on my mother's personal staff for 4 years. He paused. Ji-soo previously worked for Baek Sung-chul's household for 3 years before my mother poached her. Nia looked at him. Your mother's assistant, she said slowly, came from Baek's household. Yes. And she monitored a call that gave Baek the pretext to accelerate the council vote. Yes. So either Baek planted her, or my mother knew where Ji-soo came from and used her deliberately, Jae-hyun said, to get information to Baek without direct contact, so it would look like a leak rather than a delivery. The inside of the car was quiet. The river moved outside. Your mother worked with Baek, Nia said. I don't know how deep it goes. I know she needed the council to move fast enough to stop the engagement dissolution before I completed it. Baek needed a pretext to accelerate the vote. Those two needs converged. He stopped. I do not believe my mother fully understood the scope of what Baek was running. The regulatory filing, so I don't think she authorized that. I think Baek took what she gave him and extended it further than she intended. Does that change what she did? A long pause. No, he said. Nia looked out at the river. Her hands were in her lap, still, and he watched her processing. Not the surface processing, the verbal back and forth of problem solving, but the deeper kind, the kind that happened in the spaces between statements. She used you against him, Nia said. Not accusatory, just naming it. She used the engagement call to trigger the council move. The council move was meant to pressure me into reversing the dissolution before it was complete. He paused. She thought it would work. She thought I would look at 9 council seats and recalculate. But you didn't. No. She turned to look at him. In the dark of the car, by the river, her face was the clearest thing in his field of vision, and he let himself look at it directly. The exhaustion in it, the calculations still running behind the eyes, the complicated and unresolved thing that had been living in her expression since the ballroom, and that he was only now understanding was not simply anger or grief or wariness, but something that contained all of those and was also underneath them hope. Painful, resistant, unconvinced, but present. What happens now? She said. Realistically. The next 48 hours determine everything. If I can get the documentation to challenge the FSS filing, the investigation may be delayed long enough for me to demonstrate bad faith in the complaint. Meanwhile, I need 2 council members to flip back from Baek's column. I need to give them a reason that outweighs what he's offering them. He paused. And I need to speak with my mother. About Ji-soo. About all of it. Nia looked at the river for a moment. Then she said, I want to help. You're already exposed enough. I have the technical documentation for the Mirai project, she said. Every transaction, every authorization, every compliance filing my team submitted. If Baek's fraud allegation is about the project financing, my documentation can demonstrate the work was legitimate, clean. I can prepare a complete evidentiary package by morning. She looked at him. You said I came here to do a job. Let me do it. He looked at her. This is not your fight, he said. You said the right thing at the wrong time 4 hours ago, she said. You said the things I needed to hear, and you said them out loud in a lobby, and I watched you walk out into something you knew was going to be terrible, and I went back to my hotel and I sat on the bed and I thought about what my mother would have done. She paused. She would have helped. She would have rolled up her sleeves and gotten to work and not waited to be asked twice. Her voice was steady. I am my mother's daughter. So tell me what you need. He sat in the passenger seat of her car by the Han River at 2 a.m. and felt something in his chest that he had no clean name for. Not just love, which was present and had been present since the ballroom and probably since long before that, but something more structural than love. The particular recognition of a person who is, fundamentally, your equal, who stands in the same kind of weather without asking for a different forecast. The documentation, he said. Everything your team submitted for the Mirai financing authorization. I need it by 6 a.m. You'll have it by 5. He nodded, looked out at the river. Jae-hyun. Her voice was quiet. Yeah. If this doesn't work, if the investigation opens, if the council moves, she stopped, restarted. What do you lose? He thought about it honestly, the way the question deserved. Everything I inherited, he said. Everything my family spent 3 generations building. A pause. Nothing I built myself. She looked at him for a long time. Then build something else, she said. He turned to look at her. In the dark, in the car, by the river, she looked back at him with the expression of a woman who had already made her decision and was waiting, with something that was almost patience, for him to make his. Outside, the Han River moved in the dark, indifferent and continuous, the way water moves through every version of a city's history. The good years and the burning ones, the rises and the falls, the moments when everything changed and the moments when nothing would ever be the same. Jae-hyun's phone lit up on the dashboard between them. A message from Sung Jin. The FSS notice was issued 20 minutes ago. We have 48 hours. There's something else. The security audit pulled something from 6 months back. It's not Bayek. It's not Jisoo. Jae-hyun, the original source of the leak. The person who gave Bayek the architecture of your financial vulnerabilities. The specific transactions he built the fraud allegation around. I need you to look at this name before I send it. Because if I'm reading this correctly, the name on Sung Jin's message was Kang Mi Rai. Not Jisoo, not a planted assistant, not Bak working a back channel through a borrowed employee. His mother. Jae-hyun read the message 3 times in the dark of Nia's car, the phone screen the only light between them, and each time the words rearranged themselves into the same configuration, the same answer, the same impossible and completely inevitable conclusion. 6 months ago, 4 months before the engagement was even proposed, 2 months before the Mirai contract was awarded, Kang Mi-rai had provided Baek Sung-chul with a detailed architectural map of the Kang corporate division's most vulnerable financial positions. Transaction records, authorization chains, the specific instruments that, framed correctly in a regulatory complaint, would look exactly like the skeleton of a fraud scheme. She had not given him a weapon recently. She had given him the weapon 6 months ago and let him carry it, and the engagement call, Jisoo, the council meeting. All of it had been the delivery mechanism for something that was already built and waiting. Nia read his face in the phone's reflected light. She didn't ask. She waited. He handed her the phone. She read it, once. Set it back on the dashboard with the careful precision of someone controlling a physical response. Your mother, she said. Yes. She built the fraud case herself. She provided the materials. Beck built the case. He heard his own voice as if from a distance. Flat, functional, the voice he used when he needed his brain to keep working regardless of what was happening in his chest. She needed leverage over Bayek, something that kept him useful and controllable. She gave him the financial map as currency, information he could use against the organization if she ever needed to demonstrate to him that she could also expose the organization. A pause. She was managing him, the way she manages everything. She gave him enough to make him valuable and enough to make him dangerous, and she kept the balance. Except the balance broke, Nia said. When I told her I was dissolving the engagement, when she needed him to move fast and she activated the leverage she'd given him, he stopped. She didn't anticipate that he would extend it to the FSS filing. She gave him the information to use as organizational pressure. He used it as a legal weapon. Nia was quiet for a moment. She gave him the knife and didn't expect him to use the blade. Yes, that doesn't make her less responsible for what the blade does. No, he said. It doesn't. He picked up the phone, called Sungjin back. Send me everything, he said. The full audit trail, every document. Jaehyun Sia, send it. It implicates your mother directly in... I know what it implicates. Send it. A pause. Then, sending now. He ended the call. Outside, the river moved. Nia's hands were still in her lap, and she was looking at the water with an expression he couldn't read from the angle, but her jaw was set and her breathing was measured. The controlled breathing of someone who had decided not to fall apart. Not here. Not in this car. Not when there was still work to do. 5 a.m., she said. The documentation. 5 a.m., he confirmed. Then I need 3 hours. She started the car. I'll take you back. They drove in silence. Not the accumulated silence of two people who didn't know what to say, but the functional silence of two people who understood each other's need to think. He watched the city pass outside the window. The empty streets, the lit windows, the enormous indifferent infrastructure of a metropolis that kept running, regardless of what any individual inside it was going through. And he thought about his mother. He thought about what she had done 17 years ago and what it had cost. He thought about what she had done 6 months ago and what it was going to cost. He thought about the fact that both decisions had been made from the same place. Not cruelty, not malice, but the specific terrified love of a woman who had spent her entire adult life protecting something and had never learned to tell the difference between protecting it and destroying it. It did not make him less angry, but it made the anger a different shape. Not hot, not explosive, cold and structural, the kind you could use. She stopped the car outside his building. He opened the door, paused. Nia, she looked at him. Whatever happens in the next 48 hours, he said, you know the truth now. About your mother, about my family, about what was done. He held her gaze. I need you to know that I know it too, completely. No more managed distance from it. She looked at him for a long moment. Get some sleep, she said. You have 3 hours. He got out, watched her drive away, went upstairs. He did not sleep. By 5:15 a.m., Nia's documentation package was on his secure server. 460 pages of transaction records, authorization chains, compliance filings, and technical certifications organized with the kind of precision that told him she had not slept either. That she and her team had worked through the night with the focused urgency of people who understood that speed was the only currency that mattered right now. He forwarded it immediately to his attorney, to the legal team he had assembled in the past 3 hours. 4 lawyers, 2 of them former FSS regulatory specialists who knew exactly how a bad faith complaint looked from the inside and how to build a challenge that would give the agency grounds to delay a formal investigation. At 6 a.m., he called his mother. She answered on the first ring. She had been awake. He had known she would be. I need to see you, he said. Now. A pause. Jaehyun, Naomi, my office. 45 minutes. He ended the call before she could construct a reason not to come. She arrived at 6:50, which told him she had come directly without stopping to consult anyone or prepare a position, which meant she already knew what the meeting was about and had decided that preparation was less useful than presence. She was dressed as she always was, composed, appropriate, the external presentation of a woman in complete control of her circumstances. She sat across from him in his office, and he put Sungjin's audit report on the desk between them, and he watched her look at it. Her face did something he had not seen it do in 35 years. It cracked. Not dramatically, not tears, not collapse, but the specific structural crack of a person whose constructed exterior meets a truth it cannot absorb without fracturing. She had not expected him to have the documentation this fast. She had expected, perhaps, that she would have time to get ahead of it, to construct the version of events that presented her choices as necessary rather than catastrophic. 6 months ago, he said. She didn't speak. You gave Beck the financial map. Before the engagement, before the Mirai contract. You gave it to him as leverage management, to keep him contained. He kept his voice flat. Not to be cruel, because flat was the only register he had that was fully functional right now. You were managing him, the way you manage everything. She looked at the report on the desk. I was protecting the organization. You armed the man who is currently trying to take it from me. I didn't know he would. You gave a weapon to a man you knew was dangerous, and you're surprised he used it. He leaned forward. You told Nia's mother that I had approved them being sent away. You told her that. For 17 years, Nia believed I had chosen to let her go. Her mother worked double shifts for 11 years. She died, Eomeoni. She died without Jae Hyun. His mother's voice had gone somewhere he had never heard it go before. Not cold, not constructed, somewhere raw and cornered. Don't. His voice cracked on the word. Not with grief, but with the particular break that happens when controlled anger reaches its structural limit. Do not manage this. Do not explain this. I need you to sit in this room and hear me for once without building the response before I finish speaking. She went still. What you did to them was wrong, he said. Not strategic, not necessary, wrong. And what you did 6 months ago, giving back that information, it was wrong. And now it is going to cost this organization everything you spent your life protecting if I don't fix it in the next 40 hours. And I need to know. He stopped, controlled his breathing. I need to know if there is anything else. Anything you did that Beck can use that I don't already know about. Because if I walk into that council room and something surfaces that I wasn't prepared for. There's nothing else, she said. Her voice was very quiet. He looked at her, reading her the way she had always read him. Not for the surface, but for the architecture underneath. There's nothing else, she said again. And this time it was not constructed. It was just tired. The specific exhaustion of a woman who had been building walls for 40 years and had just run out of materials. He sat back, breathed. I need you to stay out of the council room, he said. I need you to have no contact with Baek, with the Seo family, with any council member until this is resolved. Not to protect yourself. To stop making it worse. She looked at her hands, a gesture so unlike her that it stopped him briefly. Kang Mi-rae did not look at her hands. She looked at people, at problems, at things she was solving. I wanted to protect you, she said. I know. From the beginning, from her, I know, Eomeoni. He stood up, moved to the window. The city below was waking up, the early morning traffic beginning, the light changing, the vast and different machinery of it turning over into another day. But you can't protect me from the things I need. You can only damage them. She said nothing. He heard her stand, heard her move toward the door. Gae-hyun, she stopped. The council meeting. When you go in there, I'll handle it. I know you will. A pause. You are your father's son in the ways that matter. Her voice had almost nothing left in it. And mine, in the ways I'm less proud of. The door opened and closed, and she was gone. He stood at the window and looked at the city and let himself have 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds of standing in the truth of what his family was and what it had done and what it was going to take to walk back out of this room and into the next fight. He counted them. Then he picked up his phone and called Sung Jin. Get the legal team on a call in 10 minutes. I want the FSS challenge filed by noon. And get me a read on Chairman Lim. I need to know what it would take to bring him back to center. Already on Lim, Sung Jin said. He's reachable. Beck's been promising him the Incheon distribution rights as part of the vote package, but Lim doesn't trust the delivery. Beck's made promises in that corridor before and walked them back. A pause. If you can guarantee the Incheon contract directly, set up a meeting this morning and get Director O's schedule. Same approach. He turned from the window. What's Baek doing right now? He's been in his office since 7. His legal team arrived 40 minutes ago. Sung Jin paused. He knows the challenge is coming. He's preparing for it. Good. Let him prepare. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. I'll be out in 2 minutes. And Sung Jin, when you speak to the Mirai government liaison, tell them we may have a regulatory challenge in process and that it is being addressed. Don't let them hear it from the FSS first. Done. He ended the call. Stood in the center of his office for one moment, the room where his father had made decisions for 20 years before him, where the walls held the weight of everything the family had built and everything they had broken, and he made the decision he had been building toward since the ballroom, since the terrace, since the conference room, since the dark car by the river. Not the engagement decision, not the personal decision, the organizational one. The one about what kind of man ran what kind of organization from this point forward. He made it quietly, without ceremony, the way the real decisions always happened. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the ordinary ones, in the space between picking up your jacket and walking out the door. Then, he walked out the door. The council session was called for 2 p.m. Jae-hyun spent the 6 hours between his office and the chamber in continuous motion. The FSS challenge filed at 11:40, the legal team confirming receipt at 12:10, Lim's meeting at noon lasting 38 minutes and ending with a handshake that was not a commitment but was not a refusal, which was enough. Director O at 1 p.m., 15 minutes, harder than Lim, but ultimately movable by a combination of the Incheon guarantee and the audit documentation showing the specific subsidiary contracts Beck had used to buy his vote, which O had not known were traceable, and the knowledge that they were traceable changed his calculation visibly and immediately. By 1:50, Sung-jin confirmed O was back. Lim was probable. That was 2 seats. Beck's 9 became 7. 7 was not quorum for removal. Jae-hyun arrived at the chamber at 1:58. Beck was already there, already seated. He looked at Jae-hyun when he entered, and Jae-hyun watched his face do a rapid calculation, reading the posture, the timing, the fact that Jae-hyun had arrived 2 minutes early rather than the 5 minutes late that a defensive position would suggest. Beck was not stupid. He understood immediately that something had shifted. Jae-hyun sat at the head of the table. He did not look at Beck again. The room filled. 11 men, same as the night before, same chairs, same city through the window. But the weight of the room was different, and everyone present could feel it, the way pressure changes before weather. Lim sat down. He did not look at Beck. O sat down. He also did not look at Beck. Beck's face had gone very still. Before we proceed, Jae-hyun said, I want to enter into the record a document. He nodded to Sung-jin, who distributed printed copies to every seat. This is the security audit conducted over the past 18 hours covering the last 6 months of organizational communications and financial transactions. It identifies a systematic accumulation of voting rights through subsidiary contract manipulation, executed by a council member over a period of no less than 23 weeks. He paused. It also identifies the source of the financial information used to construct the FSS regulatory complaint filed yesterday afternoon as originating from a breach of the organization's internal security, not from any legitimate compliance concern. The room was reading, the specific silence of 11 men processing information that was reorganizing what they thought they knew. Beck said, This is a fabrication. The audit trail is time-stamped and sourced, Jae-hyun said. Every document is independently verifiable. He looked at Beck directly for the first time since the meeting began. You filed a bad faith regulatory complaint using information obtained through a security breach of this organization's internal systems. The FSS has been notified of the challenge and has the full evidentiary package. Their preliminary assessment, received at 12:40 today, indicates the complaint does not meet the threshold for a formal investigation. Beck's jaw was tight. The room was watching him now. Furthermore, Jae-hyun said, the subsidiary contracts used to secure council votes, specifically the Incheon distribution rights promised to Chairman Lim and the Northern Corridor access promised to Directors Choi and Park, are not within your authority to offer. They are organizational assets. Offering them as personal political currency constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty. He looked around the table. The motion before this council is not a no-confidence vote on my leadership. The motion before this council, if any member chooses to bring it, is a disciplinary review of Director Beck Sung-chul. The room held the particular silence of a tipping point. Beck stood up. He didn't do it dramatically. He rose from his chair with the deliberate weight of a man who had been in enough rooms to know when the ground had shifted and who was deciding, in real time, how to absorb a loss without making it a rout. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Jae-hyun across the table. You think this is over, Beck said. His voice was low. Not a performance, a genuine statement. You think because you patched the vote and filed a legal challenge that you've resolved something. He looked around the table, slow and deliberate. This organization has a structural problem. It has had one for 3 years. A leader who is more interested in a personal life than in the work, who would risk everything his family built for. He stopped. Let the implication sit. Say it, Jae-hyun said. Beck looked at him. Say what you mean. In this room. On the record. A pause. The room was absolutely still. A foreign woman, Beck said. A nobody. The daughter of a housekeeper. The words landed in the room and stayed there. Jae-hyun stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He looked at Baek and the 11 men surrounding them, and he stood at the head of the table where his father had stood and his grandfather before that, and he spoke in the quiet register that everyone in this room had learned over years was the register that meant the words were final. Her name is Nia Brooks, he said. She founded and leads a $300 million technology company. She holds 7 patents in quantum encryption. She was contracted by the South Korean government, not by me, by the government, because her work is the only architecture capable of supporting the Mirai project. He paused. And in the past 48 hours, while this council was running a destabilization campaign against this organization, she spent the night building the evidentiary package that stopped the FSS complaint from becoming a formal investigation. She did it for a company she could have walked away from, for a project she had no personal obligation to save. He looked around the room. She saved this organization, not me, her. The room was silent. Her mother, Jae-hyun said, was a housekeeper in my family's home. She was a decent woman who worked honestly and was treated as disposable. His voice did not waver. I will not participate in a world that treats people as disposable. Not in this organization, not in this family, not anymore. He looked at Baek. You are relieved of your council seat pending the disciplinary review. Your access to organizational systems is suspended effective now. Sung-jin will manage the transition of your responsibilities. Beck looked at him. He looked for a long time. And then, in the face of 9 men who had stopped being his, in a room where the arithmetic had irreversibly changed, he picked up his copy of the audit report, straightened his jacket again, and walked to the door. At the door he stopped, didn't turn around. You think love is enough to run this, he said. You'll find out it isn't. He left. The door closed. Jae-hyun stood at the head of the table and looked at the 10 remaining men. Some of them relieved, some of them recalculating, some of them unreadable, and he understood clearly and without cushioning that this was not a victory. It was a survival. The organization was intact, the vote was neutralized, the FSS challenge was filed, and Baek was removed from the table. All of that was true. And also true, the structural vulnerability his mother had created was still there. The audit had exposed it, but not repaired it. The subsidiary contracts Baek had used were still entangled. The Seo family had not been managed yet. The press would have pieces of this within days. And somewhere in a hotel 3 kilometers away, a woman who had spent the night saving his organization was sitting with a project that was still technically under regulatory shadow and a board that was going to require a full accounting by end of business today. He looked at Sung-jin. Sung-jin read his face. Car is ready, he said. Jae-hyun nodded to the room. We'll reconvene Thursday. Full agenda. I'll have the stability plan by Wednesday morning. He picked up his jacket. Thank you for being here. He left the chamber, walked to the elevator, pressed the lobby button, stood in the elevator's rising silence as the floors descended and thought about Nia in the hotel. Nia and her board call. Nia sitting with the consequences of a night spent doing something that had cost her professionally and that she had done anyway. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. She was standing there, not at the hotel. Here. In the lobby of the building she had no access to, standing with her project bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand, and when she saw him, she didn't smile, didn't move toward him, just held his gaze across 20 feet of marble lobby with the expression of a woman who has been holding something together through pure will and is waiting to find out if it was worth it. He walked toward her, stopped 2 feet away. The vote, she said, tabled indefinitely. Beck is removed. She exhaled. A small, controlled exhale. Not relief, not celebration, but the physical release of a body that has been operating under maximum tension for 15 hours. The FSS, she said, challenge filed. Preliminary assessment is favorable. We'll know in 72 hours. She nodded, looked at him. Your board call? He said. 2 hours ago. I gave them the full picture. A pause. They want to review the project continuation decision by end of week. It's not a suspension, but it's not a clearance. She looked at him steadily. James thinks we can demonstrate sufficient compliance integrity to satisfy them. I think so too. You'll have everything you need from our side. Every document, every authorization, I know, she said. I know I will. They stood in the lobby, 2 feet apart, surrounded by the motion of a building returning to its ordinary operations, and the distance between them felt like the last version of a distance that had been closing for 9 years, since a ballroom and a terrace, and a conference room and a car by the river, and a night of work that had changed the shape of something permanent. I said something in front of the council, he said. What? I said your name. He looked at her directly. I said it the way it deserves to be said, in front of every person in that room. Her expression shifted. Not a smile. Something past a smile. Something more complicated and more real. Her eyes did the thing they had been doing since the ballroom, the thing where the composure was fully present, and underneath it, something else was present too, something that had been waiting under 9 years of survival and ambition and grief and building, something that was finally, cautiously, looking for a way out. Jae-hyun, she said. Her voice was quiet. I have to tell you something. He waited. When my mother was in the hospital, she said, at the end, she asked me if I still thought about you. Her voice stayed level, which cost her something visible. I told her no. I told her I had moved past it. I told her... She stopped, breathed. She looked at me and she said, you never could lie about the things that mattered. He stood very still. I couldn't lie to her, Naya said. I've been lying to myself for 9 years about it, but I couldn't lie to her. She looked at him with the particular direct gaze of a woman who has decided that the next thing she says is going to be the true thing, regardless of the cost. I need you to know that. Before whatever comes next, before the press and the council and the FSS and all of it, I need you to... His phone rang. The second phone. Sungjin's number. He looked at it. Looked at her. Answer it, she said. He answered. Sungjin's voice was stripped down to its essential components. The press already has it. Someone in the council room. A leak. I don't know who yet. It's going to multiple outlets simultaneously. They have the engagement dissolution, BIEX removal, the FSS complaint, your statement in the council room about... A breath. About her. About what you said. It's all going out tonight. A pause. Jae-hyun-si. There's a photographer outside the building right now. Someone called them ahead. This was planned. Whoever leaked it wanted the image of the two of you together when the story broke. Jae-hyun looked at Nia. She was reading his face, already understanding the outline of it. How long? He said into the phone. The story goes live in 40 minutes, maybe less. He ended the call, put the phone in his pocket, looked at Naya. The story is breaking, he said. Tonight. All of it. The engagement. Back. What I said in the council room. Someone leaked it, and there's a photographer outside right now waiting for us to walk out together. He watched her face. If we walk out together, the image runs with the story. It becomes the story. Your company, your board, your reputation. Jae-hyun. Her voice was steady. It's going to be a significant... Jae-hyun. She stepped forward, one step, closing the last of the 2 feet between them. I spent 9 years building something so large that no one could hand me an envelope and tell me to leave by morning. She looked up at him. Let them take the picture. Outside, 40 minutes from becoming permanent, the city waited. The press waited. The story waited. The 48-hour emergency that had consumed everything was about to become public and irreversible, and there would be no taking it back, no managing the narrative back into privacy, no version of the next hour that didn't change everything. Jae-hyun looked at the woman in front of him, the girl he had lost and the woman she had become, and the 9 years of distance that was, in this moment, finally, completely. They walked out together. That was the decision, and it was made in the space between one breath and the next, made without a conference or a calculation or a careful weighing of outcomes. Jae-hyun looked at Naya, and she looked back at him, and the decision existed between them before either of them articulated it, the way the real decisions always did. Not chosen so much as recognized, the way you recognize something you already knew. He held the lobby door. She walked through it. The photographer was across the street, which meant someone had positioned him there with enough lead time to establish the angle, a long lens, a clean line of sight to the building's main entrance, the kind of setup that was not improvised but prepared. The shutter fired the moment they cleared the door, and then kept firing, a rapid mechanical sequence that sounded small and clinical against the noise of the city. And Jae-hyun did not look toward it, and Nia did not look toward it, and they stood on the steps of the building in the late afternoon light of Seoul, side by side, and let it happen. Oats. It lasted approximately 8 seconds. Then Nia said, "My car is around the corner," and they walked. The story went live 37 minutes later. Sungjin sent the link at 6:42 p.m. Jae-hyun read it in the back of a car while Nia sat beside him reading it on her own phone, and the article was what he had expected, detailed, accurate in its outline, charged in its framing. The headline used the word scandal, which was the word the press always used when a man in his position made a decision they hadn't been authorized to predict. The details were there: the engagement dissolution, the no-confidence vote, Baek's removal, the FSS complaint and challenge, the council room statement, and the photograph. The two of them on the steps, not touching, not posed, not performing anything, just standing together in the honest light of a city that had been watching both of them for very different reasons. The photograph was, Jae-hyun thought, the most truthful image that had ever been taken of him. His phone began going. Nia's phone began going. The syndicate's communications team sent a holding statement to 14 media outlets simultaneously. His attorney called, and he let it go to voicemail. Seo Yeonji's family's representative called, and he let that go too, because that conversation required more than a moving vehicle and a phone, and because whatever he owed the Seo family he intended to pay properly and in full and not in the back of a car. "You're bored," he said. Nia was still reading. "They've seen it. What do they need from you?" "A call tonight. They'll want my read on reputational exposure." She lowered her phone, looked out the window. The city was doing its evening shift. The transition from workday to night, the lights changing character, the traffic thickening. The photograph puts me at the center of a story about an organized crime family's internal power struggle. Yes, that's not a position most tech CEOs voluntarily occupy. No, she turned to look at him. "I did it voluntarily." "I know. I want to be clear about that. Not for you, for myself. I made that choice with full understanding of what it looked like." She held his gaze. "I need you to know that I don't do things I haven't thought through. I'm not someone who acts on feeling and explains it later. I know that about you. Then you know that when I walked out that door, I was telling you something." He looked at her. The car moved through traffic. Outside, Seoul continued its enormous indifferent motion. "I know," he said quietly. She turned back to the window, picked up her phone. "I need an hour to prep for the board call. Can you? I'll have Sungjin send a car." She nodded. Then, "After the call, come find me." The next 72 hours were the worst and most clarifying of Jae-hyun's professional life. The press coverage metastasized the way press coverage does when the story has every element that makes people stop scrolling: power, money, romance, a family empire fracturing in public, a woman in a black dress on a flight of steps beside the most feared man in Korean organized crime. It ran in Korean media, then Japanese, then got picked up by 2 international financial outlets who framed it as a corporate governance story, then by a culture site in New York that wrote it as something else entirely, something closer to what it actually was. He did not manage his own coverage. He let his communications team issue factual statements where factual statements were appropriate, and made no personal comment, because personal comment would give the story oxygen, and the story needed to be allowed to exhaust itself rather than fed. He focused instead on the things that were within his actual control: the FSS challenge, which proceeded favorably, the Seo family conversation, which he had in person, in their home, sitting across from Yeonji's father for 40 minutes, and speaking honestly about what he should have said 6 weeks ago when the engagement was proposed, and the organizational stability plan, which he delivered to the council on Thursday morning, and which ran 60 pages and proposed the most significant structural reform the syndicate's corporate division had undergone in 20 years. The CEO conversation was the hardest. He had expected anger. Yeonji's father gave him something worse, a long, measured silence, and then, she knew. A pause. My daughter. She knew from the night of the party that you were not fully present in this arrangement. He looked at Jae-hyun across the table. She told me the next morning that the woman from the Mirai delegation was someone from your past. I told her she was imagining things. He picked up his tea. I was wrong, and she was right. Jae-hyun said, I owe your daughter an apology, a direct one. She doesn't want an apology. The older man set down his cup. She wants to not have wasted 14 months. Those are different things, and only one of them you can give her. I can honor the business terms we negotiated, every financial protection the engagement was meant to provide. I'll structure it as a direct corporate agreement, no personal component, clean and legally binding. A long pause. You should have proposed that 6 weeks ago, Yeonji's father said. Yes, Jae-hyun said, I should have. The meeting ended without warmth, but without destruction, which was the best outcome available. He met with Yeonji herself the following day in a hotel lobby near her family's offices, and she received him with the composed precision that characterized everything about her and listened to his apology with an expression that was not forgiving but was not hostile. The expression of a woman who had already processed the situation and arrived at her own conclusions and had no interest in being managed through someone else's guilt. You were honest with me at the party, she said. When I asked who she was, you told me not to worry about her, and I knew what that meant. She looked at him steadily. I chose to go forward anyway because my family needed the alliance. That was my choice. I'm not a victim of it. You deserved better than the choice you were given, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, so did she. 17 years ago. She stood. Make it right, Kang Jae-hyun. That's the only thing either of us needs from you. She left. He sat in the hotel lobby for 10 minutes, thinking about the particular kind of decency that existed in people who had every reason to be otherwise, and felt the weight of how many people had paid the cost of choices he had failed to make sooner. Nia's board cleared of the project continuation on Friday afternoon. The FSS issued its final determination on the regulatory challenge Monday morning. Bad faith complaint, insufficient grounds, case closed without formal investigation. Jae-hyun read the determination in his office and felt not triumph but the specific quiet of a structural repair that had held under load. The building had not fallen. The foundation was exposed and needed work, but it had not fallen. He sent Nia the FSS determination the moment it came through. Her response came back in under 2 minutes. Good. James is doing a happy dance. Don't tell him I told you. He looked at the message for a moment. Then he put his phone in his pocket and told Sung-jin to clear the rest of his afternoon. He found her at the workspace on the 42nd floor, where she had been working every day since the story broke, with the same focused consistency she had brought to every day before it, which was one of the things he had learned about her in these weeks. That crisis did not interrupt her work, it ran parallel to it. That she had developed the capacity to hold multiple catastrophes in separate compartments and address each one without letting them contaminate each other. It was a survival skill. He recognized it because he had built the same one. She was alone. The team had gone. The screens were still open. Project schematics, completion documentation. But she was sitting back from the workstation with a coffee going cold beside her, and she looked, for the first time since the ballroom, like someone who was allowing herself to be tired. She looked up when he came in. FSS, she said. Done. Closed. She nodded. Picked up the cold coffee, looked at it, set it back down. James wants to take the team out tonight, celebrate the project completion. She glanced at him. We hit the 4-week mark tomorrow. Finished early. You always finish early. I always finish on time. Early is different. She pushed back from the workstation and turned her chair to face him fully. She looked at him with the direct, unguarded look that she had been allowing herself more frequently over the past week. The look without the professional overlay, the one that was just her face being honest. How are you? The question caught him slightly off guard, which was not a feeling he was accustomed to and which he had come to associate specifically with her. She had a way of asking the direct personal question in the middle of the operational context, slipping it in between the FSS determination and the project timeline, making it impossible to deflect into logistics. Functional, he said. That's not what I asked. He moved to the window. The city below was the same city it had always been. Indifferent, enormous, continuous. Clearer than I've been in a long time, he said, about what needs to change in the organization, about the structure, about what my father built and what it became and what I want it to be going forward. He paused. Talking to Yunji helped, actually. She said something. What did she say? He turned from the window. She said to make it right. That was all she needed. He looked at Nia. She's a better person than the situation gave her room to be. Nia was quiet for a moment. She is, she said. I hope she finds something that's actually hers. She will. She's too clear-eyed not to. A silence settled between them, not the professional silence of two people working, and not the tense silence of two people managing what was between them, but something new, something that had the quality of a room after a long storm has passed. The windows still damp, the air still charged, but the violence of it over. Your board call Friday, he said. How did it land? They cleared the project, you know that. I mean, how did it land with you, being in front of them with this attached to your name? She considered this. I've been in front of my board in harder situations, she said. I've been in front of investors when we were 6 weeks from running out of runway. I've been in front of them the morning after a major security vulnerability was disclosed. She picked up the cold coffee again, finally drank it, made a face. This was different because it was personal. They could see it was personal. My CFO, she's been with me since year 2. She looked at me during the call with this expression like she was trying to figure out if I was okay. Not professionally, but actually okay. Are you? She looked at him. I told you I'd get back to you on that. You told me you wanted to not be afraid to want something, he said. That's what you said in the lobby. I remember what I said. I'm asking if it's still true. She set the coffee down. She stood up from the chair and moved to the window, standing beside him, not touching, looking out at the same city from the same angle. Up close, she smelled like she always smelled, clean and dark, nothing floral. And he was aware of the 5 inches of air between her shoulder and his, aware of it the way you're aware of something that is about to change. My mother used to say that the things worth having are the things that scare you most, Nia said. Not because fear means it's right, but because the absence of fear usually means the absence of stakes. She looked at the city. I've built a company. I've been afraid of losing it approximately 400 times. I've been afraid of investors, of regulators, of competitors, of my own technical team's limitations, of market conditions, of all of it. She paused. None of those fears felt like this. He turned to look at her profile. Like what? She turned to look at him. Like something I've been carrying so long I stopped noticing the weight. She held his gaze steadily. I've been carrying you since I was 17 years old, Jaehyun, even when I was furious at you, even when I thought you'd let us go without a fight. I built the company partly to prove something to a version of you I'd constructed in my head, a version that was cold and strategic and had chosen his family's empire over me. She stopped. And then I came back here and you dropped your champagne glass. He didn't speak. He let her have the room. You dropped it and I knew, she said. I knew immediately that the version I'd constructed was wrong, and that made everything harder, not easier, because it meant 9 years of anger had been keeping something else at bay, and without the anger I had to actually feel the other thing. She exhaled. The other thing is terrifying. What is it? He said. His voice was very quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I love you. I've loved you since I was 17 and I never stopped and I'm furious about it and I'm done pretending otherwise. The 42nd floor was silent. The city moved below the window, vast and indifferent. And inside the glass, the two of them stood with the truth between them. Not clean, not resolved, not the simple reunion of people who had been kept apart by external forces, but the complicated and specific truth of two people who had been shaped by each other's absence and were now, finally, standing in each other's presence, with nothing left to manage. He reached up and touched her face, one hand, his thumb at her cheekbone, the specific careful touch of a person who has been imagining something for a very long time and is now terrified of the reality of it. She let him. I never stopped, he said. Not for a day. She turned her face slightly into his hand. It was the smallest motion. It broke something open in his chest that he understood would not close again, and he did not want it to close again. And the relief of not wanting it to close was enormous and exhausting, and the best thing he had felt in 9 years. She said quietly, "Don't disappear on me again." "Never," he said. "Not for any reason, not for any amount of money or obligation or empire or—" "Jae-hyun." She put her hand over his, the hand at her face. "Stop talking." He stopped talking. The story did not end that evening on the 42nd floor. Stories of that weight, the kind built from 17 years of distance and grief and survival, and the specific stubbornness of love that won't be managed into irrelevance, don't end in single moments. They end in accumulation. In the slow building of ordinary days that are extraordinary only because you're in them with the right person. What followed was not easy. It was not meant to be easy, and neither of them approached it expecting ease. The organizational reforms that Jae-hyun had outlined in the stability plan took 11 months to fully implement. The syndicate's criminal operations were not abandoned overnight. That was not the world he lived in, and pretending otherwise would have been a fiction neither the council nor the law would have accepted. But he began, systematically and with the kind of patience that large structural changes require, to redirect the organization's capital and influence toward legitimate enterprise. The process was slow and expensive and involved more legal work than he had anticipated and required 3 separate negotiations with regulatory bodies who were, at varying levels of enthusiasm, willing to accept structured transitions in lieu of enforcement. Sung-jin managed most of it with the same unflappable precision that had made him indispensable for 8 years, and in the 3rd month of the process, told Jae-hyun, without ceremony, that he had been waiting for this direction since year 2 of his employment and was glad it had finally arrived. Baek Sung-chul's disciplinary review concluded in month 2. He was removed from the council permanently, and the subsidiary contracts he had used to purchase votes were restructured. He did not disappear from Seoul's business landscape. Men like Baek never fully disappeared, but he receded, and the organization he had tried to take contracted around him without it, and that was enough. The FSS case remained formally closed. Nia's board, after 2 months of careful watching, issued a formal statement expressing confidence in her leadership and the company's direction. The statement was lawyerly and precise and said nothing warm, but what it said was sufficient, and Nia had never needed warmth from a board statement. She stayed in Seoul longer than the original 6 weeks, then longer still. The extension was professional at first. The project's successful completion generated 2 follow-on contracts with the Korean government, and supervising their initiation required her physical presence. And then it became something that was not professional at all, and she stopped applying professional justifications to it. She kept her apartment in New York. She opened a Seoul office for Brooks Quantum Systems in month 4, which her CFO characterized in the quarterly report as a strategic expansion into the Asia-Pacific market, and which Nia characterized in a call with James Lim as, "I live here now, James, please update the org chart." James updated the org chart. Masem. Kang Mi-rai spent the first month after the story broke in deliberate withdrawal. She did not contact Jae-hyun, did not attend council sessions, did not appear at the family's regular social obligations. Jae-hyun understood this as the withdrawal of a woman who was, in her own way, processing, not with therapy or conversation, or any of the mechanisms that ordinary people use to work through catastrophic self-knowledge, but with the particular internal reckoning of someone who had run on certainty their entire life and had been shown, clearly and irrefutably, that the certainty had cost more than it built. He called her in month 2. She answered. "I'd like to have dinner," he said. Not a conversation, not a resolution, dinner. A pause. "Thursday," she said. Thursday dinner lasted 3 hours. They talked about his father, his condition, which was stable, which was the best word available for a man in his situation. They talked about the organization, about the reforms, about the council's adjustment to the new structure. They did not talk about Nia. They did not talk about Jisoo, who had resigned in month 1 and whose departure his mother had noted with a silence that told him she understood exactly what the resignation represented. At the end of the evening, when they were standing outside the restaurant on a street in Gangnam, his mother said, "She's staying." "Yes," he said. "The Seoul office." "Yes." His mother looked at the street. The traffic was light at this hour. A weeknight, late. The city doing its lower register thing. She was quiet for a long moment. Your grandmother, she said finally, came from nothing. Less than nothing. Her family had... There was nothing there. She married into this organization when it was barely an organization, and she built it alongside your grandfather in a time when building it meant things I choose not to describe in detail. She paused. She was not a woman who required approval from anyone for anything. She said once that the people who needed everyone's permission to live had already lost. Jae-hyun looked at his mother. I am not saying I was wrong, she said. I am saying... She stopped, restructured. I am saying that I understand something I did not understand at the time, about what I was protecting and what I was destroying and the degree to which I confused the two. It was not an apology. He had not expected an apology, not because she was incapable of remorse, but because she was a woman for whom remorse expressed itself in behavior rather than words. And he had learned to read that the way he had learned to read everything about her, with patience and without demanding a translation. Thursday, he said. Same place. Bring her. His mother looked at him. She won't come if you ask her, she said. She has no reason to. She'll come if I ask her, he said. She'll come because she is not a person who avoids difficult rooms, and because there's something she deserves to hear from you directly, and she knows it, and she'll come. He met his mother's gaze. I'll tell her it's not going to be easy. She already knows nothing worth doing is easy. That's not going to stop her. His mother was quiet for a moment. She's not what I expected, she said, very quietly. No, he agreed. She's more. The Thursday dinner was the hardest meal Jae-hyun had ever sat through, and he had sat through dinners with people who were actively trying to kill him. So this was a meaningful comparison. Nia arrived on time, in the same charcoal blazer she had worn to the lobby's cafe months ago, which Jae-hyun suspected was a deliberate choice. Not armor, but a reminder. His mother was already seated. The geometry of the restaurant was different from their morning cafe encounter. A private room, a round table, no hierarchy of arrival to establish before the conversation began. He had arranged it that way intentionally. For the first 20 minutes, they spoke about the Brooks Quantum Soul office. Professional ground, neutral enough to establish a rhythm. His mother asked intelligent questions about the quantum encryption architecture. She had done her research, which was consistent. And Nia answered them with the precise fluency she always brought to her work. And across the table, Jae-hyun watched two women who were both, in their own ways, the most formidable people he had ever known, carefully taking each other's measure. Then his mother set down her chopsticks and looked at Nia directly and said, I told your mother a lie the night we sent you away. I told her Jae-hyun had approved the decision. The table went still. I know, Nia said. I told you this because I needed you to leave, and I needed you to not come back. I needed the attachment severed cleanly. His mother's voice was even, but it was the evenness of significant effort. I did not think about what it would cost you to believe that. I thought about what it would cost my family if you stayed, and I did not think about the other thing. Nia looked at her. She did not fill the silence. She waited. Your mother, Kang Mi-rae said, was a person of considerable dignity in her work and in the way she carried what was done to her. A pause. I know she is gone. I have known for 2 years. I keep track of the people I have affected. She looked down at her hands, a gesture she shared with her son. I cannot repair what she experienced. I cannot give her back what she lost. I can tell you that the dignity she modeled in the face of what I did was not something I was unaware of, and not something I was unmoved by. She looked up. I was moved by it, and I did not act on it, and I am telling you this not to ask for forgiveness, which I understand is not mine to ask for, but because you deserve to know it. The restaurant was very quiet. Nia was still for a long moment. Her hands were on the table, still, and Jae-hyun watched her face do something complicated and private. Not the composure breaking, but the composure doing something other than holding things at bay. Absorbing something. Allowing something in. She would have been 63 this year, Nia said. She would have come to the Seoul office opening. She would have stood in the lobby and looked at the company name on the wall, and she would have been embarrassing about it, honestly. She cried at everything, good things, bad things. She cried when I graduated, and she cried when we got our first government contract, and she would have cried at the office opening and told everyone in the lobby that she had mopped floors to make this happen. She stopped. She would have been so... She stopped again. One breath. She was the reason. For all of it. Every decision I made, every hour I worked, it was for her. To give her something to cry at. Kangmi-rae looked at Nia across the table. Her face had done the same thing it had done in Jae-hyun's office. The structural crack, the fracture in the constructed exterior. But this time she did not look away from it. She sat with it. She raised someone extraordinary, she said. I am aware of that. Nia looked at her for a long moment. I know you are, she said. They did not become friends that evening. That was not what the evening was for, and neither of them was a woman who performed reconciliation for the sake of a clean narrative. What happened was something less dramatic and more durable. Two women sitting across a table in a private restaurant in Seoul, eating dinner, speaking honestly, and leaving at the end of the night with something that was not warmth, but was not hostility either. Something that had space in it for what came next. In the car afterward, Nia sat beside Jae-hyun and looked out the window for a while without speaking. He did not push. He had learned in these months that her silences were not absences. They were processes, and they concluded when they concluded and not before. She loved you, Nia said finally. Your mother. That was real. The love was real, even if everything she did with it was wrong. Yes, he said. That doesn't make it okay. No, but it makes it human. She looked at him. I can work with human. He reached across the seat and took her hand. She let him. Her hand in his was warm and specific and real, in the particular way that things are real when you have spent a long time doubting their existence. They rode through Seoul in the dark, with the city burning on every side of them. The wedding happened in the spring, not a large ceremony. They had both had enough of large ceremonies, enough of rooms full of people watching them for the wrong reasons. 60 people. The Han River venue he had quietly secured 4 months before he proposed, because he had known by then that he was going to propose and had wanted the location to be right. And the right location for a wedding between two people who had spent 9 years finding their way back to each other was water. Something continuous. Something that kept moving regardless of what happened on its banks. Sung-jin cried. He denied this for approximately 3 minutes after it was pointed out, then stopped denying it on the grounds that the evidence was overwhelming. James Lim gave a toast that managed to be simultaneously about quantum encryption architecture and about love, and was genuinely one of the funniest and most moving things Jae-hyun had ever heard at a wedding, and he stored it in the specific part of his memory reserved for things he wanted to keep exactly as they were. Kangmi-rae sat in the front row in a cream-colored jacket and watched her son marry the daughter of a woman she had put on a plane 17 years ago, and she did not look away for a single moment of it, which was, Jae-hyun understood, her version of bearing witness to the full cost and the full worth of the thing. She did not cry. She sat very straight in her chair and held her composure, and at the end, when it was over, she walked to Nia and took her hands in both of hers and said nothing, just held them for a moment. And Nia stood still and let her, and the two of them remained like that for 3 or 4 seconds that were very long and very full. It was not a resolution. It was a beginning of something that had not existed before and would require continued tending. But it was real, and it was present, and it was there. They launched the foundation in month 8, the Yoon G. Brooks Foundation, named for Nia's mother, whose full name Jae-hyun had looked up the day after Nia told him she was gone, and had held quietly for months until the right context arrived for it, was structured to identify students from disadvantaged backgrounds with demonstrated aptitude in technology, engineering, and mathematics, and to fund their education fully, from secondary school through university. Not a scholarship program in the narrow sense, but a complete support architecture, tuition, housing, mentorship, professional placement. The kind of intervention that addressed not just the financial barrier, but the systemic one, the absence of infrastructure around promising people that allowed potential to be lost. Not for lack of ability, but for lack of everything surrounding ability. Nia ran the foundation's board alongside Brooks Quantum, She did both things the way she did everything, completely, without apology for the demands it made on her time, with a focus that the people around her found alternately inspiring and exhausting, and that Jae-hyun had long since accepted as simply who she was, and the world was lucky for it. The first cohort was 37 students. Nia interviewed each of them personally. She sat across from 17-year-olds in underfunded schools in Incheon and Busan and Seoul and asked them the same questions she had been asked by no one at that age. Not what they wanted to study, but who they wanted to become. Not what they were good at, but what they were willing to fight for. She told them, without softening it, that the road was going to be hard and long, and that the people around them would sometimes not understand what they were reaching for. She told them that this was not a reason to reach for something smaller. She told them about her mother without telling them about her mother. Just the structure of it, the bones of a story about a woman who worked double shifts so that something could be built, so that something could matter, so that the world her daughter would inhabit could be larger than the world available to her. She did not say the name. She did not need to. Every student in every room understood what she was saying, and several of them, over the following weeks, wrote letters to the foundation that began with variations of "My mother." Jae-hyun read those letters when Nia left them on the kitchen table, which she did every Friday evening. He read them and thought about the specific human capacity to transform what has been done to you into something that protects someone else from the same thing. He thought about it not philosophically but practically, as a choice, made repeatedly, requiring effort, not automatic, not guaranteed, built through the accumulated decisions of a woman who had every reason to close and had chosen, consistently and stubbornly, to remain open. He thought, "This is the most courageous thing I have ever watched anyone do." He thought it many times over the years. It did not become less true with repetition. A year after the wedding, on a Tuesday evening in late March, Nia set down the report she had been reading and said his name. He looked up from his own work across the table. She held a look that he had learned by now to read in its finest details. The architecture of her face, the specific configuration of her eyes when something significant was present in them. He was reading it now, and what he read was enormous and terrifying and exactly what it was. And the recognition of it went through him like something seismic, the particular internal shift of a life reorganizing around a new center of gravity. "Nia," he said. She was very still across the table. "Yeah," she said. Her voice was steady, but underneath the steadiness was something that was not quite calm, something that was the anticipation of a response, the particular vulnerability of someone who has said the true thing and is waiting to see what the air does with it. He stood up, moved around the table, went to his knees in front of her chair, which put him at her level, which put him looking directly at her face, which was where he needed to be. He put both his hands over hers where they rested in her lap. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright and her jaw was tight with the effort of holding the enormous thing quietly. And she was the most beautiful and most real person he had ever looked at. And he was 36 years old and she was 35, and they had 17 years of distance behind them, and 1 year of this in front of them, and an entire future that was finally theirs. He said, "Tell me." She told him. He stayed on his knees in front of her chair for a long time after she did. His head bowed, his hands around hers, breathing. Outside the window, the Han River moved in the dark the way it always did, indifferent and continuous, the way water moves through every version of a city's history. The lights of Seoul were all around them. The city was enormous and alive and going about its business with the splendid and complete indifference that cities have always brought to the private moments of the people inside them. He thought about his father, in his room in the house in Yongsan, his hands still and his memory inconsistent and his body diminished, but alive, and still sometimes lucid enough to know his son's name and to say it with a warmth that made Jae-hyun understand each time what had been worth preserving in the generation before his. He thought about Nia's mother in a hospital room in Boston, not seeing the company, not seeing any of it, not seeing this. He thought, "I will make sure our child knows her name." He lifted his head, looked at Nia. She was looking back at him with the expression that was hers entirely. Not softness, not the clean emotional resolution of a story that had arrived at its destination, but something more complex and more true than resolution. The face of a woman who had been afraid and had kept going, who had been alone and had kept building, who had lost things that were irreplaceable and had refused to let the loss be the last word. A woman who had walked into his ballroom in a black dress with 9 years of survival on her shoulders and had stood her ground without flinching and had stayed. "Are you okay?" he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed. Short, real, the laugh of someone releasing pressure that had been building since the words came out of her mouth. "Ask me again in 7 months," she said. He pressed his mouth to her hands. Stayed there. Outside the window, the river kept moving. The city kept burning. The years behind them were what they were. The cost of them real. The damage of them real. The losses permanent and unrepaired and carried. None of it erased. All of it present. The way the past is always present in the people it has shaped. And present also. This room, this light, this woman, this truth. The thing that had survived 17 years of distance and one family's damage and one young man's failure of nerve, and two people's separate and parallel lifetimes of building something strong enough to withstand everything that had already tried to end it. It had not been easy. It was not finished being hard. There was work ahead. The foundation, the organization, the slow and imperfect repair of things that had been broken and could not be unbroken, only tended. There was his mother and his father and the council and the press and all the ordinary machinery of a life that was embedded in a world that did not stop requiring things of you because you had finally figured out something true. But the thing that mattered most in this room, in this moment, was not the work. The work would be there tomorrow. The work would always be there. What was here, right now, was this. The girl he had lost. The woman she had become. The life they had built not in spite of everything it had cost, but through it, on the other side of it, carrying the full weight of it and walking forward anyway. Ye-hyun stayed on his knees in front of her chair with his hands around hers and the Han River moving in the dark outside the window and the city enormous and indifferent all around them. And he understood, finally, completely, without reservation, that the greatest thing he had ever done was not run an empire. It was stay on his feet long enough to deserve her, and this time nothing was going to take that from him. Nothing in the world.